Hey guys, thanks for tapping in on this video. I want to remind you that we are crowdfunded and dream-driven around here. If you would like to support the show, head on over to patreon.com/pigeons420. With your support, we can interview some of the biggest minds in our space right here. Thank you so much to our members. Thank you so much to our patrons for supporting the show, and thank you for watching today's conversation.
Oh, we have Mr. Todd McCormick on the line here, guys, ladies and gentlemen. Without further ado, Todd McCormick. Todd, my man, how
Hey,
are you, sir?
good to see you.
I am.
Thank you for
Oh
letting me
man,
come in
it is
tonight.
great to see you. Great to see you. Thank you for coming on. This is
My pleasure.
this is a great moment for me. I've been a huge fan of yours for a very long time. I think you are an OG in the space, as the definition gives, and it is epic to be here. Thank you, Todd. Thank you.
Okay. I'm definitely old.
Wise. I like to exchange those two words. Wise rather than old.
I agree. As a kid who started studying martial arts at a young age, I always admired the old man on the mountain because it was like that's where I would seek my answers. That where there was a quote I once read. It said, "The man on top of the mountain did not get there by falling."
Couldn't say it better myself. Couldn't say it better myself. That's a beautiful quote, Todd. That's a beautiful quote. Todd, before we get into anything, real quick, a little bit just about you. Who are you and what are you doing right now?
Who am I is a great question. My name's Todd McCormick. I'm definitely a human, born on planet Earth. Unfortunately, when I was born, I had cancer, not once, but 10 times as a child. As age 2, I started off with a spinal fusion. I had cancer in the bone marrow in my first 5 vertebrae. So my first 5 vertebrae are fused together. And then it moved to the skull, and I had 3 more lesions in my skull. And then it moved to my right ear. I had 2 more lesions in around my right ear, all of it surgery and chemotherapy and radiation. And then it moved down to between my left lung and my heart. I had it in soft tissue, and that was not so good. Radiation, I got a big scar over here. And then it moved down to my hip, my left hip. I had it in 2 locations. I was in a wheelchair for about 8 months as a child. And it was around that time my mom started giving me cannabis. Was sitting in a waiting room reading Good Housekeeping of all things. The February 1978 issue, if anybody's geeking out, had a thing on cancer. And my mom was just an avid reader and picked it up, and she read about it, and she brought it to my pediatrician, who was really cool, and asked him what he thought. And at that point, I'd had cancer 9 times between ages 2 and 9. And he just told her, look, it's not your worst option at this point. And so on the ride home from both chemo and radiation, because I was getting both at the same time, charming. And I was dizzy and nauseous and feeling like dead. And she handed me a joint, and she said, sip it like it's a straw. And my mom was a hippie. I grew up around her smoking weed and cigarettes, so it wasn't strange to me. So I just slid down in front of the passenger seat in her car and started hitting this joint on the ride home up I-95. And by the time we got home, about 25 minutes later, I was high. And I was a big fan of Popeye, so I wanted some sautéed spinach. So she thought you're definitely high, and she called my pediatrician and told him. He said, "Well, try tomorrow. Don't give him any." So the next day, no weed. Came home, wanted to die, and then was upstairs laying in bed, and my mom came up with a joint, and we smoked it. She gave me a joint. She had a joint. We sat on my floor, and then we fucking sat there listening because I had this little 45 of Don McLean's American Pie, and I loved it. I was obsessed with the song at the time, and I was like sitting there stoned, saying, "Today is gonna be the day that I die." And she's like, "No," and that got me into cannabis. And at that point on, my mom was really cool. I mean, my mom was very upfront with me. My mom held up a pack of zigzags one day and said, "Do you know what these are?" And I said, "Those are your zigzags." She said, "No, you don't know what they are, and you've never seen them before if anybody asks." And then she held
Smart.
up a bong, and she said, "Do you know what this is?" I said, "It's a bong." She goes,
Yeah.
"No, you don't know what it is, and you've never seen it before." And I was like, "The fuck?" And she's like, "Look, Todd," she goes, "they'll lock me up and take you away, and we'll never see each other ever again." She was like, "So you really got to keep this a secret." And I was just like, "Holy shit." And you know, I think shortly after that, she handed me Pink Floyd, Us and Them, and some headphones and a joint. And was like, "You'll figure it out." And she was right. And over time, I did. And what really turned me into an activist, though, is one day there was another kid on chemo, and my doctor asked me to talk to him. And when I walked down the hall with my doctor, I was so short that I was like, you know, around his hip or a little bit higher. And I was like, "You want me to lie to him, right?" And he was like, "I never told you to lie." And I was like, "Well, you don't want me to tell him that I'm, you know, smoking the." And he was like, "Oh, this ain't gonna work." And he turned me around and walked me right back to my mom. And it was like not even a minute between me walking out of the room with my doctor and walking back in. And my mom looked up and she was like, "What happened?" And before he could say a fucking word, I was like, "He wants me to lie." And he's like, "I never told you to lie." And I'm like, "Yeah, you did. You told me not to say anything. I know if you don't say anything, that's still a lie." And he was just like, and my mom was like, "I see what's happening." And I had a good talk on the way home that day, you know, but I felt, I felt jilted. I felt like, what's going on here?" And from that point on, I don't know, it caused a little anger in me, that was like, what is happening? And it caused me to start studying cannabis, as crazy it sounds. And my mom had a little book called The Children's Garden of Grass, and it was a comedy book. And it was they also made an album. It was early 70s. I used to sneak it out of her room like it was fucking porn. I'm not even kidding. And I still have a copy of it. She gave it to me later, but it's really funny because if you go to it, has an index and it says the dangerous effects of grass are, and you turn to it, and it has a poem before the chapter, and it says, "A child should always say what's true and speak when he is spoken to and behave mannerly at table, at least as far as he is able." And then when you turn the page, this left page is blank. The right page just says, "The dangerous effects of grass are," and then it says, "One, getting busted." Nothing else on the page. Turn the page, next chapter. And I hate to say it, but I think there was a lot of truth in that. And as I got older, I became an information junkie. Dr. Lester Grinspoon used to joke that, you know, whatever we want to call it for the sake of the show is not addictive, but learning about it quickly becomes. And I think totally true. And that put me down this path, man. And here we are today. And today, these days, I own Authentic Genetics. I am a breeder. I'm a seed dealer. I have growers in all 50 states and 23 countries at this point, and I've been online for over 5 years. I've been selling seeds for a lot longer than that, and I've had a nursery since I got out of prison in 2004 because I
Because
ain't
you
gonna change.
should.
Yeah, I ain't gonna change. And
No.
no. As a kid, in '97, when the law changed here in California, I was in Amsterdam, and my friend Dennis Perone came over for the '96 Cannabis Cup, and I've been good friends with Dennis for a long time. I founded in 1995 the San Diego Compassion Club, where I was redistributing donated cannabis for free, and I've been in this for a long time. I had one of the very first medical prescriptions from a Dutch physician given, or I received, I should say, written for me in November of '94. And when I came back to California in early '95, that nobody had any type of medical recommendation. Dr. Todd McCormick was only writing, well, letters of condition. So if you had AIDS or you had cancer, your doctor would say, "Hey, he's messed up. Give him some weed." But he wouldn't say, "Give him some weed." And when I came back with that prescription, it really changed everything because Dr. Todd started writing actual recommendations for cannabis. And because I know it sounds weird, but Elvie Musica was an older woman that I absolutely adore. She was the first woman to ever receive medical cannabis from the federal government. She has glaucoma. They were sending her cans of 300 joints a month from the University of Mississippi, called the Compassionate Investigational New Drug Program. We used to just call it Compassionate IND. And they would grow the weed in Mississippi. It would go through Research Triangle Institute, where they would roll the joints, package them, and send them to a group of patients. And
What year was
LV,
that? What year
she
was that?
started getting cannabis around '88. The first patient was Robert Randall. Robert was a gay man who ended up helping streamline the acceptance program, which got more people into the program. And then when Reagan got in, they closed the program to new applicants, saying that it sent the wrong message in the war on drugs because, you know, they didn't want to hear it. And that mentality goes back to Nixon when he got the Schaefer Report, which was written by a Republican governor.
It was a joke.
He ignored it. It was an excellent. No, the Schaefer
Oh, I
Report's
got it
excellent.
backwards. The Schaefer was
If you
good.
smoke
That's
cannabis
right.
and
That's
you've
right.
used cannabis, you pick up the Schaefer Report anywhere in it, you'll read it and go, "Oh, that's true. Yeah,
That's right.
true."
That's right.
And
And he
Nixon didn't want to
ignored
hear
that.
it. Yeah, it recommended for decriminalization at the very least, legalization, no harm, and they ignored it. And really what bothers me the most and why I'm still, I'd say, actively active in trying to kill this propaganda that we've been up against is because now that we've discovered the endocannabinoid system, there's no justification for prohibition. Now we realize that it's really a necessary medical system within our body, and our bodies make similar chemicals. So for people listening, there are cannabinoids. Cannabinoids come from the cannabis plant. When they come from the cannabis plant, they're phytocannabinoids, but your body also makes cannabinoids. And when they are made internally, they're called endocannabinoids. At the end of the day, cannabinoids, be it anandamide internally, which stands for AEA, or the equivalent to THC. But anandamide is also a beautiful word. When they discovered the molecule, they named it using a Sanskrit word, ananda, which means bliss, and then amide, meaning basically internal. So it basically means internal bliss. And anandamide and THC go into the same CB1 receptor and cause you to be hungry, horny, happy, drowsy, all the effects of cannabis, pain relief, anti-swelling. It's all the same stuff. And it's really fascinating. And right now I'm working on a book called From Cancer to Cannabis, The Essential Guide to the Endocannabinoid System. And I hope to make a third documentary with my friends about the endocannabinoid system because after I got out of prison, we made The Union, the business behind getting high in 2005, released it in
Incredible.
2008. Thank you. We got Joe Rogan, Dr. Todd McCormick, who I mentioned. We've lost him to cancer.
Rest in peace.
Also, Dr. Lester Grinspoon, who we've also lost. A lot of my friends are in it. I got to put together the interviewee list, and then we followed up with the Culture High. We started that in 2010, released it in 2014. That has Joe Rogan again, me again, but it also has Snoop Dogg, Wiz Khalifa, and then in 2012, when I was receiving the Cannabis Culture Award in Barcelona, I was receiving it with, of all people, Richard Branson and Dr.
Yeah,
Lester Grinspoon.
incredible.
Yeah.
Now,
just
hold
typical.
on, real quick, because I know you bounce, and you're just like me. You are just like me. I can segue so well. I'm really good at having a million questions about everything, and just to go back real quick to your mom, and because that's a really touching story when you tell the story of your mom having no other choice, being at her wit's end. Do you have children, Todd?
No, because of the chemo and the radiation, fortunately, I have a dog.
Hey, oh, so you do. Yeah, I get it. I have dog too. Yeah, as a father, my heart crushes when I hear of a parent in a position of such helplessness, because sparing the story of my son was also very sick. He did not have cancer. He had HSP, Henoch Scheinra purpura. It's a swelling and an incredible rash throughout your body, and his limbs would just swell, and it would get incredible. And it was in places where, you'd see it on his face. It would look like someone like hit him, and it was just severe swelling. And to save you the story, because I get choked up when I tell it, we were at a position where we had no idea what to do, and doctors were lost because we are in a local area and it was really tough. And when I learned about this, at this core of this, what is it? HSP? It's not a disease. It is a disease?
It's an inflammatory disease, yeah.
It is inflammation. Immediately I thought of one thing that I know works very well with inflammation. I thought cannabis. And I got to be honest with you. I'm not going to be as forthcoming with the decisions that I made as a father for my child because your time was a lot longer ago than mine, and I would face perhaps repercussions. So I'll leave it as allegedly, but I definitely considered utilizing cannabinoids in my son's diet to try to combat those things. So I commend your mom, Todd. I really commend your Todd, or I really commend your mom, Todd, because it not only takes a lot of love, but it takes a lot of kahunas to go and try to. We know what we know now. The information back then was almost non-existent. So for your mom to go out on a wing, I think is incredible. So good for her. Did you have a good relationship with her? I would assume.
My mom unfortunately got small cell cancer last January, passed away August 31st. And
Oh, I'm
it
sorry to
was
hear
really
that, Todd.
hard because when she started going through chemo, was telling me, man, I'm so sorry. I had no idea what you're going through when you were a child. Because I mean, I grew up in New England, man. Even though I was a little cancer kid, they wake me up when it snowed and be like, go shovel. And like, fortunately, I feel like it wasn't, I mean, I didn't get coddled at any point in my life. And I think afterwards she felt a little guilty about that because she didn't realize what it was really like to go through that type of a vibe. And she was very apologetic this last year. And I could understand that, because I went through it fuck 9 times. She couldn't even imagine. Like, and then it was the psych, because like you get better, psych, and then you get sick again. It's like such a shitty roller coaster. And she was a very brave woman. My mother's very feisty, kind of woman that carries a long barrel 357. So
Yeah.
she was not too shy. And my mom just, I don't know, she was a young hippie when I was born, and just yeah. And I don't know. And then my stepdad was a 6'5" Vietnam vet. The guy was a monster, like 280, all muscle, hair down to his chest, like rode a Harley, made them look like mini bikes when he sat on them. Like it was ridiculous. And he's a big dude. And I don't know, like I don't know, grew up like, you emulate what you're around. And my
Mhm.
mom was very courageous, and my dad feared fucking nothing. I mean, nothing. And I grew up a lot like that. And I think if I hadn't had that optimism instilled in me at a young age, I might not have made it through cancer. And then cannabis absolutely turned it around my whole life. I mean, I can't praise it enough. I feel like ever since I was 9, I've been, on a mission from God, and I've been her agent. Like, I know that sounds like a really weird thing to say, but I think a lot of people that are listening to this who has had it touch their lives and help them balance themselves and feel better and just be normal, feel like we owe that little plant a lot of love. And I feel like my whole life has been about honoring that healing that it gave me and trying to share it with other people.
I, you're absolutely right, and I totally agree with you in regards to an agent because I never met your mother. However, I can guarantee the man that I'm looking at here today is a product of her and your father because you are resilient, you are an advocate, you will not back down. You've been persecuted, prisoned, you've been ridiculed, and you still stand tall, chest out. I can tell that that's the qualities of your mother and your father, and I'm very proud to have, or I'm very glad that you had a good relationship with the both of them because that means a lot. It crafts the people who we are today, and that's why I agree with you when you say you're an agent of the people who raised you and how you're agent of your mother. So it's a good way to put it.
It's
Um,
funny, but I was mostly raised by my grandmother, who was born in 1911, and she was a little Italian lady that was the second oldest of 9, and her brothers all went off to World War II and came back. They all came back, fortunately, but she said they came back different. And my grandmother, I don't know, was really tough on me as a child growing up, but she was always raising me to be an adult. She always told me, you're gonna have to move out, you're gonna have to take care of yourself, you're gonna have to be the man of the house, you're gonna have to step up and be responsible. And I love her for it. I mean, I used to think she didn't like me when I was out there shoveling snow at 7 a.m. before school, but she gave me very thick skin. She taught me how, to grin and bear it. I mean, when a lot of people don't realize, but I got busted, when I came back from Amsterdam. I had the good fortune of meeting a multimillionaire publisher who really was working on a book about cancer and cannabis, and he gave me a $250,000 book advance, which at the time was a shit ton of money to me. And I went and rented a Bel Air mansion because got to live somewhere. And I had a huge plant collection, a huge seed collection, because I just spent the year in Holland making seeds with Ed Holloway, old Ed, and at Positronics. And so when I came back, I had all these seeds I wanted to plant and all these sects and selections I wanted to do. And I wanted the whole like rainbow of cannabis from the shortest flowering to the longest flowering, everything in between. If this was an AA meeting, I would stand up and say, excuse me, I'm a hoarder. I have a problem collecting plants. Can't give them up. But I came back and I started growing all this pot, and I had plants everywhere. I was in the middle of sexing and selecting, and I got basically raided July 29th, 1997. Woody Harrelson posted my $500,000 bond. Larry Flint's attorney showed up and defended me. And I proceeded to fight the government from 97, 98, 99. And it basically boiled down to them taking away any mention of a medical necessity defense that I had. They wouldn't let me bring in any of my doctors to testify that I had a medical condition. They wouldn't let me bring in my lawyer, who I met with prior, to ask him, how can I navigate state and federal law? His advice was, don't sell weed. I was like, don't need to. He's like, you'll be fine. But instead they charged me with intent. And then it boiled down to either cooperate or we're going to recommend prison time. And my attitude was, when do I show up for prison? Because there's no fucking way I'm going to cooperate. And they were like, really? And so January 3rd, 2000, I started a 5-year prison sentence. I spent the New Year's 1999, 2000 at the Playboy Mansion, which was a Friday night. I didn't even have the heart to tell Hef that I was going to go to prison on Monday because I felt like it would ruin his night. And then spent the weekend with my friends. And then fucking Monday I had to go self-surrender. And they were such pricks that after 18 months, they sent in my attorney and he said, Todd, I already know your answer, but I'm obligated to come in and tell you what they're offering you. And I said, what's that? He said, time served if you'll come down and cooperate. Debrief, they call it. And I said, fuck no. And he goes, you're going to sit here for another 3.5 years? I said, dude, I got to live with my life, live with myself for the rest of my life. And he was like, and I did. Sat there for another 3.5 years, made friends, and had a good time. I met the guy that used to make Orange Sunshine LSD, Nicholas Dan. Check out Sunshine Makers if you get a chance. Nick was a great guy. We did yoga for 2.5 years and used to sweat with the Native American Indians. Absolutely loved the guy. He was cool. He was teaching me organic chemistry on the South Yard of Terminal Island. And then I spent time with Ricky Ross, the drug dealer. Me and Ricky are friends. I got a lot of respect for Ricky.
Ricky Ross, the buck? Ricky Ross.
Real, no, not the rapper, the actual drug dealer. He's my friend.
Jesus. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And F Ricky Ross, the rapper, Rick Ross, because all he did was, he's a former prison guard, dude. He stole my friend's name.
Take his name, yeah, and run with it?
Huh.
Yes.
Yeah, and yeah, that was his rapper name, Rick Ross.
Yeah, that's a travesty.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
A prison guard using a drug dealer, it just blows my mind.
That's unfortunately, Todd, you and I were talking before the show, and I don't want to dive into it too much, but this industry is rife with that kind of mentality, kind of a facade. Maybe I personally don't appreciate that people like yourself, your business, your genetics, your story don't get championed more. Don't get the recognition that it deserves. And I know maybe you will argue that it does, and I would argue that yeah, maybe it does too, but what I don't like seeing is those that don't deserve it get far more credit and recognition than they deserve, because merely out of presence or social media clout or whatever association with whoever, it seems that the story of the OG as someone who would take the sword for the plant from the justice system, offered time served, and said, fuck that, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. That's spoken like a true man with dignity and a backbone. That's almost not found today, it almost seems. And not only not found, but championed. So, it's frustrating to me to see that happens, and see that you kind of take that kind of seat to that. I appreciate you as an OG, and before you say it, I just feel like it's guys like you that paved the way for a guy like me and people like me to come into this and just move in. I don't have to worry about 5 years of jail time. That'd be crazy.
No, I completely like you. I'm a bit of a reluctant hero. I always just did it because I felt like it was the right thing to do. And I think loyalty is lost on a lot of levels. And the reality was is that I loved my friends. You know, I started working with Jack Herer in 1994. I've been an editor of his book till he died in 2010, and then I released the 12th edition of his book with memorials in it to him. Um, I love Jack, and you know, I had a lot of good friends. Woody posted 500,000 in cash to get me out of jail. Larry Flint's attorneys. I got busted at 7:30. I met them at 5:30 in the morning. And I was like, whoa. And I didn't realize I had friends like that. And a lot of times I tell people, like, you never want to get busted and find out you're all alone and no one has your back. But when that happened to me and I realized I was just surrounded by love, it was a different feeling. I mean, I get you know, sledgehammer, the government coming down to make an example out of me. And then my publisher was one thing, but to have that kind of support was kind of wild. And it was that support that I never even thought about it. I never had a Jesus in the garden moment where I asked daddy if I really had to go through it. It was like, no fucking way. I'm going through it. Like, it was never a question of if, it was just a matter of deal with it. And that a lot of that came back from cancer because you don't get a garden moment with cancer. Cancer isn't going to be like, yeah, you're blessed, move on. It's like, screw you, you're suffering. And it sounds even weirder, but I believe that cancer was an experience that was hard to appreciate while I was going through it, but I wouldn't want you to be able to take it away from me now. If you had a magic wand and turned into Harry Potter in front of me and you could wave it over my head and I'd never had cancer in my whole life, I'm afraid I'd wake up in Providence selling cigarettes at a 7-Eleven or something. Like, no passion, no drive, who knows? So I'm really grateful for what I went through as a child because I'm really proud of who I am today. And I've always tried to make the hard decisions. I've always tried to, I don't know, like, do what's right, as crazy it may sound. And when I got out of prison, man, Jack Harrow was at, you know, at the shop. My friends at the Galaxy Gallery threw a getting out of prison party for me. Literally, I went from Phoenix to Melrose Ave to a party. And I felt like James Bond getting out of prison. This girl from Maui picked me up in a limo, and she had a laptop, cell phone, wine, weed, chocolate, hemp clothes. I walked out in 100% hemp, and then we took a limo from Phoenix to LA, and then I got to attend a getting out of prison party. And I know it sounds weird, but I don't think that's what happens when you cooperate against your friends. I don't think, you know, personally, I'm grateful for what happened. And, you know, and I didn't like prison, just like I didn't like cancer, but I'm okay. And I made good friends. I made good friends when I went through cancer. I made friends when I went through prison. And in some ways, I'm grateful I got to spend time with Nick Sand. I ate a lot of acid in my teens, and I did a lot of psychedelics, mushrooms, good friend of mine. And I think that now it helped me through because I got cancer for the 10th time in my left arm when I was like 15, 16. And I started tripping a lot and it gave me great perspective. And now there's all this science that shows that you can use psilocybin one time and it actually causes you to like have, you know, abolish lifelong depression. And I'm thinking, I can't count how many times I used it. I mean, I can't even almost like close to even counting how many times I've done mushrooms. And when I was living in Amsterdam in 1996, they became totally legal. And all these smart shops started popping up everywhere, and you could get fresh or dried, and it was magical. And I went to a party at one place called Mystere 2000 one night, and you had to get there between 9 and 10, and then they shut the indoor, and you can only leave. And at 10 o'clock, everybody sat down. There was only enough, they only let enough people in for the amount of chairs that they had. So everyone would be able to sit down if they wanted to. And then as we sat down at 10, they like came out and like rang a little bell, and they were like, tea will be delivered to your tables. And they brought out all of these like French press teas of and mushrooms, and we all started drinking tea collectively at 10 o'clock. And then by 10:30 we were all having this like multi-dimensional conversation, like talking to people across the room, not loud, like just talking to them. And then at one point I remember somebody standing up and saying, excuse me, I would like to read a poem I wrote. And the whole room at once, must have been 100 people, the whole room just went, And we listened to him deliver this cool poem, and everybody's like, and then everybody went back to interacting again. I'd never seen anything like that. And I was just like, this is crazy. And so
Epic.
I'm a big fan of it. And I think that these plant medicines can help us a lot. And I was listening to you earlier, and I'd like to say something because you
Please.
mentioned about children using, and I would like to point out that there are cannabinoids in breast milk. And
Yes.
that your body, your babies, your children are making endocannabinoids, whether you like it or not. And their CB1 and CB2 receptors are active, whether you like them or not. And the reality is, when science tried to block them, they had to stop their tests because it messed up so many elements of the body. And because they thought for a minute, we'll just block these receptors and stop people from wanting to hit the ganj. And they were wrong. And that's when, in the early 90s, we started learning so much about our own body and the endocannabinoid system. And it's absolutely fascinating. And 30 years ago, when I started working on Jack Herer book, we have a whole chapter on hemp seed nutrition. And the woman that was the contributor to our book, Dr. Roberta Hamilton, she was a UCLA professor. She heard me talk about having cancer, and she pulled me aside and she was like, hey, you got to learn this stuff. And she was like, hemp seed oil is the most perfectly balanced EFAs on the planet. It has a 3-to-1 ratio, which science now believes is ideal. She says, and the problem with Western medicine, or Western diet, excuse me, is that it has a 10 to 20-to-1 ratio. So what I mean by a ratio is you have 2 essential fatty acids, linoleic, linolenic, W6, W3. Unfortunately, W6 is inflammatory and W3 is anti-inflammatory. So you're supposed to have 3 parts W6, 1 part W3. Unfortunately, American diet is 10 to 20-to-1 W6 to only 1 part W3. And this is why the Midwest is round for the most part. This is why you see inflammation. I mean, if you look at red meat, for instance, if you eat grass-fed beef, you're good. That has a 3-to-1 EFA ratio. If you eat regular beef, oh my God, 10 to 20-to-1 ratio, which is why my dog reacted to your dog. Chill out. And don't even start that. He's
Right.
around like everything's crazy. But this is even more fascinating because when she taught me about this stuff 30 years ago, we did not know about the conversions of W6 and a balance of EFAs into endocannabinoids. And it turns out that people that are deficient in a balance cannot make endocannabinoids on demand. And a lot of us that find and crave the plant might be doing so because our diets are so out of balance that our body cannot make the endocannabinoids on demand like it wants to. And then when we bump into the plant, we find out, hey, this has this, like, I always imagine, like, do we really want a banana or do we want the vitamins in the banana? Is our body craving a banana or is it craving what it registers as being in that banana? And I think that I even believe, and I'm making an argument in this book, that maybe cannabinoids should be considered more like vitamins and minerals, like vitamin D being an example, because your body creates vitamin D on demand, and you can also get it through food. Well, okay, great. My body creates AEA on demand. It's called a neurotransmitter. Cannabis creates THC. So you have this situation where I believe that science is not only denying science and denying the research and denying the reality, they're doing so because of this old quote that I read. And I used to write this in all the books. It was by Daniel Bornstein, and I used to write this in all of Jack's book. And his quote was, "The greatest obstacle to discovery is not ignorance. It is the illusion of knowledge." And I've always felt like that is the problem cannabis has, because everybody thinks they know what it is, but they really don't have a clue. And what Jack used to run around teaching everybody was the food, the fuel, the fiber, the history. When I first read The Emperor Wears No Clothes, it was September of 1993, and it blew my mind because I'd never ever seen it laid out in such a way, like a wheel, and Jack put all the spokes to the hub of life. And it was like, oh, what did we do for paper before we cut down trees? Hemp. Oh, what did we do for sails and ropes
Yeah.
before cotton and
Yeah.
nylon? Hemp. Oh, what did we do for paints and varnishes before polymers and synthetics? Hemp seed oil. Oh, wow, this is kind of getting crazy. What was canvas made out of? Well, canvas is a cognate of cannabis because all canvas goods came from only one source. So all of the old tents and riggings and canvas covered wagons going west, this is why we have hemp in the Midwest. This is why all the people from Europe were bringing it over because they needed the cloth, the ropes, the riggings. They needed it. And it was important.
So
And what Jack really brought to us all was that history and understanding that we're all being ripped off, we're all being lied to, we're all having our history straight stolen from us.
yes.
And anybody that is watching this, Jack Herod did one great thing. Not one, but one of the greatest things that Jack did was he got a video in the 1980s called Hemp for Victory. It was on a VHS tape. It was black and white, 14 minutes. He gave it to a Wall Street Journal reporter in the early 90s. And the Wall Street Journal reporter did his due diligence, called the Library of Congress and said, "Can you give me a citation on this film?" They said, "Nope, not real. We didn't make it. That's a forgery. Must be fake. If it was real, we would have a record of it." So he called Jack up and said, "You're a liar. You're a frauder. You're a complete fraud." And Jack couldn't swallow that. Went all the way from LA to DC, went to the Library of Congress, went there, went through all the microfiche, couldn't find it. So he went outside to do what any rational smoker would do, smoke. And then someone that was with him said, "Hey, there wasn't microfiche back in the 40s. What would we have looked in if we had come back in 1943? So they marched into the librarian and said, and they said, "Oh, it's in those books by the printers you were using." So they went back, started going through all the books. They found 2 citations for Hemp for Victory, 1942, U.S. Department of Agriculture, 14 minutes. And what that really showed, and what Jack had to do is he had to photocopy the citations in front of the librarian, have them certify, and then he had to resubmit it to the Library of Congress so they would put it into our nation's recorded history, because somehow when they were doing the microfiche, they overlooked those 2 citations, not once, twice, and then said that the film didn't exist to a Wall Street Journal reporter. And after Jack did this and then showed him the proof, he put Jack's face on the cover of the Wall Street Journal, I believe in 1991, because it really solidified not just that the government's lying, but they're absolutely directly doing it. They're doing it purposefully. They are omitting the information from our schools, from our libraries, and even from the Library of Congress, because they don't want the narrative that they're a bunch of liars to get out. And I got to tell you, it still pisses me off to this day.
Then, okay, I'm glad you mentioned that. I have 2 things I want to add. First thing, to go back to the children and cannabinoids, I agree with everything you said, and I want to clarify my position. I don't believe children should smoke cannabis. That's my only caveat. And I'm not saying, dude, I'm not saying you are not a prime example. I'm not saying I'm not a prime example. Mrs. P actually smoked before I did, and but the reality is that it's not good for your lungs. As a child, for medication, I feel as if there are far more applicable ways. You unfortunately just didn't have the options that we have today for applications and dosages,
Yeah.
like trinkets, tinctures and edibles and teas and so on and so forth. So I
My
just
mom
wanted to
was
say that, because that's my position. Do you agree about the smoking in regards to what we know today?
2 sides of it.
Go ahead,
So it
please.
depends on the medical condition, because nothing's quick. Like if you're dealing with a nausea situation, swallowing something like an edible can be next to impossible, because you can't get it down in order for it to do any work. And the problem is that if you can't keep it down, you're not going to get medicated by it. So in some instances, especially in my situation when I was 9,
What
it was
about
instantaneous relief.
depository? I mean that with a straight face. And I mean this because you're enlightening me, because I didn't
And I say
actually
this,
consider
fortunately,
the speed
my
of dose.
mom did not have that in her arsenal at the time, because that
And
would have
that's my
sucked. I
point.
was
That's kind of
right.
my point, is that's why you had to smoke it back then. And I'm not I'm just thinking it's bad for their lungs. And
I'm not
anyways,
advocating a little kid. Like I've never
no,
smoked a
no,
cigarette in my
of
life,
course not.
and I concur with you. Like looking out. At the same time, if you look at the research done by Dr. Donald Tanshkin, who was hired by the Reagan administration to find cancer and lung and cancer in both throat and lungs directly from cannabis use, Dr. Donald Tanshkin, who came out and said that it would be considered the best anti asthmatic that you could ever get. It opens up your lungs. It frees the phlegm from your cilia, which is the small little hairs inside of your lungs. The reason it acts differently from tobacco is because tobacco is a dry smoke. When it goes into your lungs, it settles into the small and it burns it up. On the other side of that, you have this resinous, oily smoke that contains cannabinoids and terpenes, and you have a very different experience inside of your lungs with it. So when
Okay.
people are trying to compare
Okay.
tobacco use to it's really not working. And when you look at there's so many people like me, for instance, I've been smoking ganja since I was like
Mhm.
12 constantly every day, even in prison. It, you don't see the lung problems from people because even in the
There's
emperor we had
drugs
a
in prison, Todd? What? No,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah, it
Please continue.
turns out, yeah, it turns out, yeah. And people are like, I can't believe you smoked weed in prison. I was like, if there was ever a place I needed a J, it was there.
No kidding.
So,
No kidding.
yeah.
Okay, so you enlighten
And
me. Okay, you enlighten me. I actually I didn't think about the effectiveness in regards to smoking it. That or sorry, the speed in which the dose occurs. I didn't
but
think about that.
now
Please.
if I had a child in my same similar situation, because of effectivity, I'd probably give them a vaporized dab in a puff coat at a low
Sure.
temperature so
Sure.
that there was even less of an effect of no burning material and a quicker effect. Because I will say this about dabs, like LV Musica, who I mentioned earlier, been a good friend of mine for a long time. I love the woman. She's like a second mom to me. She could never find enough relief in a J. She would come over, I would joke and smoke all my stuff. And then when we got dabs, she would come over, do a few dabs, and it was the first time I ever saw her content. She'd be listening to music, watching TV, and she wouldn't constantly be puffing away. And this is the difference between dosing because, you get however many milligrams in a puff of a J, you get however many, dozens, if not hundreds, in a big inhalation of some good dabs. And for her, it was enough to rest her eye pressure and to give her the relief that she needed for a longer period of time. And I really like dabs because as someone who has chronic pain, it's the difference between like a band-aid and a remedy. Like you could smoke a J and it feels okay, but you could do a dab and be like, I'm good. And there's a big difference in that. And that's where I think dosage is important. And why I'm also looking at the THCA these days is because there's a lot of people that have like children, as you'd mentioned, and they need the medical benefits, but they don't necessarily need the psychoactive side effects. And while I like them, I enjoy the feeling of being elevated all the time. There are times when you just want to be able to go to work or focus or get through the day or go to school or what have you.
There's a time and a
And but
place.
yeah, and now with all the research I'm doing, it looks like you can absolutely ingest the acids, THCA, CBDA, well, CBD doesn't matter as much because it doesn't really do shit anyway, but it just blocks your CB1 receptor from THC, so FCBD in my little opinion. But um, I like those other effects. So, but you can use THCA just as effectively and not have a lot of the and where that came from was my friends using basically you know what they would call Rick Simpson oil, which was just alcohol extraction into a goop of stuff that wasn't really palatable, and it was all decarbed because alcohol doesn't evaporate away to like 170 degrees, 171 or so, and by that time it's taken all the terpenes that are most volatile with it, and it's decarbed all of the cannabinoids, so you get this goo that's really not that palatable. It's totally decarbed, and cancer patients were taking it like a gram at a time, which is a lot.
A
But the
lot.
problem is that they would be, knocked out for 24 or 48 hours afterwards because after the initial onset, you're going to sleep like a baby, like it or not. And and I started actually, and everybody listening to this, um, back in the 90s, I was using Marinol and I was high as F one day and I was looking at the Marinol and I just used a two part epoxy in my house. And I had this thought. I was looking at the Marinol thinking, synthetic molecule suspended in sesame oil. What if I suspended an organic molecule in hemp seed oil? So I went over to the kitchen and I poured some hemp seed oil into a frying pan. I went over to my hash greens and I scooped up some resin powder of trichromes and I dumped it in the oil and stirred it up as I heated it, and they all melted away because wax and oil, same, same. And I was just like, interesting. And then I started putting on some bread and I got way too high. And so I started putting it in mason jars in my refrigerator to see how long it would take the hemp seed oil to dissolve the trichromes in a cold environment. And it takes about 10 to 20 days. The resin heads, the trichromes themselves, dissolve first, and then you get like these little non-granular stalks that are more dense and they don't break down as quickly. But once the trichrome breaks down and it's gone, all of the terpenes that were in that and all the cannabinoids that were in that are now in the oil. So if you now just filter the oil out so that any of the like little non-granular stems or pieces of other plant material that may have gotten in there when you were sieving comes out, I like to use a stainless steel coffee filter kind of vibe. Um, Now you have phytocannabinoid infused hemp seed oil, and it's the most healthy oil you could ingest. Anybody watching this, I can't recommend it enough. Even just hemp seed oil on its own, the recipe is about 1 tablespoon per 50 pounds of body weight per day. Your body needs it and can't get it. And the reason this resonated so deeply with me is because when Dr. Roberta Hamilton was explaining this to me back in 1994. She was explaining that we need this essential fatty acids every day, that our bodies need them and can't make them, which is why they're called essential. And when I was a 12-year-old, when I was 8, really was my first one, but when I was 12, I got my second motorcycle. It was a two-stroke Suzuki, and I used to have to put some two-stroke oil in and the gas in. And if you don't put in the two-stroke oil, your engine will seize in the funnel end. So I used to always have to modulate my gas and my oil. So here I was listening to her, and I was just like, wow, we're just putting gas in and we're seizing up our engines. No wonder we're not running right. No wonder we're sputtering. No wonder we don't have all the power. No wonder we have these problems. And she made total sense to me. And I was just like, I went home, got some hemp seed oil, and started doing it. And it's amazing. And I use myself an example because like a lot of my friends from my 20s, you can see the inflammation in their face and their necks and their hands, their fingers. It's like it builds up over time, and trying to be balanced will keep you, you know, looking balanced. So what the endocannabinoid system is doing is creating what's called homeostasis within your body, which literally means balance. And if you want to maybe crave the ganj a little less, you only have to start using hemp seed oil or a balanced oil equivalent. But I prefer hemp seed oil because it's non-refined. It's the only vegetable oil in the world that has a 3-to-1 ratio. Most oils don't have W3 at all. And it's really, really fascinating. And to anybody watching this, if you start consuming hemp seed oil every day, a couple tablespoons at least, within a couple weeks, you will be sleeping better, eating better, thinking better. Everything in your life will feel easier because you will be, I don't know, more balanced internally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We balance we balance the pH, we balance our plants. It only makes sense that we would do the same thing within us. The second thing that I was going to mention or ask was in regards to why there hasn't been any movement towards legalization. However, you said something very interesting. You refer to it as trichrome, and
Trichomes?
I
Trichomes, trichromes.
trichome. Yeah, I say comb,
Yeah, right. There's
like a
no R
comb.
in it. It's
There is
not
no.
chrome. It's CHOME.
Yeah, no, yeah,
TRICHOME.
nope. The only I used to laugh at people that said chrome, and you are not the first OG and respected person in the space that uses the word trichrome. And I'm wondering where the
No, I
hell
don't
does
use
that come
chrome.
from, Todd?
It's not chrome. It's a trichome. COME.
Oh, so it's
TRICHOME.
just an
There's no
accent?
R in it. No, sir. The spelling of trichrome, that little crystal on top of
Yeah,
your favorite
yeah,
flower,
yeah.
is a trichrome. This is a non-granular stalk. When the
No,
little
we know
capital
what
head
it
is
is.
on,
It's just
called a
how it's said.
trichome.
No, I know. We
Well, a
know.
trichrome is a trichrome. I don't know. So a lot of people want to put an R in it, like it has chrome in it, but it really doesn't. It's a trichome. TRICOME.
Oh, okay.
THR.
So,
There's no
I thought
R.
I could hear you putting an R in it.
It's because I'm from New England, dude. We
Okay,
put R's
yeah.
in everything.
Okay, I knew it was an accent. Okay, I knew it was an accent. That's the thing, is because I'm hearing it from other people too. And then I'm like, oh, do I have this wrong? Because I'm a reader now, only because I've learned from the internet. Don't be mistaken. I don't read books, unfortunately, but I read from the internet, and trying to pronounce the things I read are horrible. I used to say, for instead of mycorrhizae, I used to say mycorrhizae, because I just literally sounded it out using phonetics, and that's the worst thing to do. So I was a little confused there, Todd.
I
But
heard you
thank you. It's
stumble
the
over
accent.
agonist lately earlier. Yeah,
It happens.
it does. Hey, man, it's cool, and we're all from different places. You know, tomato,
That's the
tomato,
best
in my
part.
opinion. As long as you understand what somebody's saying to you,
That's the
like
best
when I was
part.
in Amsterdam, that's
And
the whole point. Is do you understand me? And if
I've got like
the
a
answer is
monkey
yes,
brain, dude. So sometimes it's like you're talking, and like something I'll get held up. I'm like, whoa, 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 wait a second. So the second thing that I was going to ask was, you've mentioned the endocannabinoid system. You've mentioned Jack's work, which is absolutely incredible. To which you were an editor of The Emperor Wears No Clothes, second version, if I'm not mistaken.
forever. Um, well, from '94 forward, we put we put the 10th,
Yeah. When did you
okay,
start?
so in 1994.
And that was.
I met him during the white book with the green that Chris Conrad illustrated,
Mhm.
and then because we of issues I'm not going to disclose, we had to republish that book and with a black cover,
Mhm.
and then when we got the new publisher, Mike Kleiman out of Austin, nice guy, he gave Jack the money and everything. We started working on the 11th edition in '97, around when I got busted. The leaf on the cover, the Emperor, was grown by me. It's Black Domina. Came out of my garden. And I'm the one who got to design the cover and put the things around it. And it was supposed to be all realistic imagery and stuff. And then the back of it was going to be the Declaration of Independence fading into a piece of hemp. And it was supposed to be the right color. And then the guy, because I was being prosecuted, it went over to this guy, Leslie, and Leslie took credit for my layout and then didn't understand it and screwed up the colors and made an orange book. And when I got it, I was fucking so pissed. And I was like, how can you do this to me? And he didn't even understand it. And I didn't even get to explain it to him until after Jack died, that you screwed up my cover. And he apologized. You screwed up my cover and took credit for it at the same time. And I understand why you screwed it up, because you didn't have the idea to do it in the first place. And it bummed me out. But the reason I wanted it to be the Declaration of Independence going to Canvas is because I wanted to tie in the Declaration of Independence being printed on hemp to Canvas being such an integral part of the development of our country. If it wasn't for Canvas, covered wagons and sails and ropes, and where would we be? And I got to sit down with Dan Rather, the journalist, one day after he did Bill Maher's Real Time with on HBO, and he just ended up sitting across from me at dinner, and I asked him, I was like, you a history buff? And as soon as I said that, Bill was sitting next to me. He goes, it's a trick question. And he was like, how can it be a trick question? What do you got, kid? I'm old enough to be history. And I was like, great. So I said, okay, Columbus floated over. He discovered a plant that they didn't know of in Europe. And he couldn't discover the plant. He did not discover the plant, couldn't find the plant that was responsible for the cultural evolution of Eurasia. What was those two plants? And Bill laughed, and Dan looked at me and he's like, well, tobacco, obviously, but responsible for the cultural evolution of Eurasia, don't you think that's a little lofty? I said, well, I don't know. Let me ask you a few questions then. And Bill's laughing at this point because he's heard all this bullshit 1,000 times.
Mhm.
And I said to him, was paper important for our cultural preservation? He goes, oh, yeah, absolutely. I said, okay, great. I said, what about ropes and sails?
Mhm.
Oh, yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. What about the great art, that's
It's
painted
ignorance.
and depicted our culture in Europe? He said, absolutely. I said, yeah, okay. I said, well, paper was invented using hemp and mulberry. And when you look at things like linens, the first things we were using were things like hemp. And realistically, some of the oldest fibers were fish nets that they found off different areas that they were using for cordage to catch food. And then if you look at canvas art, literally, it is hemp seed oil based paints on literally hemp fiber canvas depicting our history.
Crazy. It's
And it says,
crazy.
and then if you look at Columbus's ship, The sails, the ropes, the riggings, the maps, the Bibles, the clothing they wore. I mean, think about this. 1492, a little bit before the invention of the cotton gin in 1790s. There was no cotton clothing. There was no cotton ropes. There was no cotton sails. None, zero, zilch. It was all hemp. And they floated over here with their hemp sails and their hemp ropes. And I said, do you know what oakum is? And he looks at me, goes, no, but I suspect you're going to tell me. At this point, Bill is laughing his ass off at this whole conversation. And I was like, oakum is hemp fiber. Actually, at that point, before that, I said to him, do you know what the cognin of cannabis is? Do you know what the etymology of canvas is? He said, no. I said, it's cannabis. All canvas comes from that one plant. It's the long fibers. And he was like, and I says, and the paper was from the cellulose. And he looked at me like, holy shit. And then I was like, do you know what oakum is? And he was like, no. I said, it's the fibers of the hemp plant marred in tar and then stuffed into the planks of wood on the boats, and it would harden. And then they would use hemp seed oil to lacquer over it so the boats wouldn't sink. Think that was important to the discovery of the New World? Last I heard, the Atlantic's kind of deep.
Perhaps.
And he looked at me, and Bill was just laughing at all this because I had Dan rather stumped, and he said to me, he goes, why don't you think we know any of this? I said, not to be rude to you, but you guys are too busy, writing about Britney Spears and Justin Bieber to write about anything of depth and reality. I said, the reason we don't know this is because you're not telling us this. You should know this, Dan. You're an educated journalist that I have a lot of respect for. And he was just like, whoa. And Bill at the end was like, I told you it was a trick question.
Set him up to fail.
Well, Bill knows me. Bill used to visit me in prison. I mean, Bill's been one of my best friends since we met in '97. So
you've got you have a lot of famous friends, Todd. That's incredible.
Oh, I just moved to LA. I just met my neighbors. It's not my fault.
That's fair.
I didn't do anything. Dude, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar lived down the street from me. What am I doing? Supposed to say F you to him? He's cool as shit. You know, like I was with him one night at the Playboy Mansion. And I wasn't with him. I was at the mansion. I was getting food, and I looked up, and there was a suit pocket next to my head. And I looked up, and it was Kareem. And suddenly that vision of Bruce Lee kicking him in the chest was like, oh my God. And then he walked away. I said hi to him. He said hi to me. And I followed him like a puppy, right to his table, because it was open seating. It's the mansion. And I was standing there. I was like, may I sit with you? And he was like, of course. And I sat down. And he was like, I said, hey, me and you have the same doctor. And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, well, I know you got your script from Jack Herrer. I'm the editor of his book. And he was like, you are? And he looked at me for a minute, and he was like, we started talking, and I was like, yeah, I'm a big fan of yours. And he looks at me, he goes, and it finally clicked for him. He goes, do you live in Bel Air? I said, yeah. And he goes, Todd McCormick? I said, yeah. He goes, I'm a big fan of yours, actually. And he reaches out to shake my hand. His hand was like this long. I felt like a little kid. And we started talking, dude. And he was such a sweet guy. And he said to me, I asked him, because he got cluster headaches, get migraine headaches really bad. And I said, hey, man, did you ever play hard? And his response was, did you ever see me play? I said, yeah, of course. He goes, well, then you saw me play hard, because I used to have to smoke before I went on the court every single time because I couldn't afford to get a headache while I was at work. And I was like, wow. And I mean, here, the NBA all-time scoring champion at the time, under the influence of happiness. And it helped him, though. And, like, the bummer for me was that guys like him were afraid, still are. I mean, I love Kareem. I think he's an absolute hero. But still very, it's come out that he's a medical patient and everything, but he's still very shy about advocating because of the ramifications of it, because so many people think they know what's up with it, but they're wrong. You know what I mean? And there's people like him who they love and admire, not even realizing that this guy was basically, using it for his medical benefit for a long time. I mean, I don't know.
What's baffling to me is that, as I mentioned earlier, despite Jack's work, despite the knowledge of the endocannabinoid system, despite the knowledge that we know about the effects that it has medicinally for a myriad of reasons, why do you think it's still illegal? Why do you think there's still such a difficult... It's so hard for politicians to wrap their heads around this?
Well, sir, unfortunately, America is I love America. I'm grateful to be American. At the
Good.
same time, I've been an activist for a long time. I think there's a lot of government corruption. I think a lot of lobbyists have owned our Congress and our Senate and our presidency for a long time. And a lot of the most well-funded of them are the pharmaceutical industry, the petrochemical industry, the alcohol industry, the tobacco industry, and all of them have a reason to keep cannabis out of the picture because of hemp. And I mean, we could go through it. Pharmaceutical industry, we're already seeing it. People are replacing their prescriptions with the good old ganja because it helps them better because the cannabinoid system accepts it better, it works better, it helps people. At the end of the day, there wouldn't be any interest in it if it was BS. People know in their heart how much it helps them, and you're never going to change their mind once that happens to them. Then the second I would say is the oil industry. I mean, they know more than anybody that you can take a crop of hemp and make biodiesel, or you can make ethanol or methanol. I mean, hey, we run dragsters on ethanol. I mean, so come on, we use it as a fuel. So they know that hemp could be a competitor to them, especially with environmental concerns and the climate changing because of us dumping all our exhaust in the air and cutting down all the trees. And Jack was running around saying, "Look, you want to stop climate change and global warming? Plant more hemp. Stop cutting down your forests." I mean, you're literally looking at your key exchangers of CO2 to oxygen and you're hacking them all down. And Jack always purported like, let's grow more hemp because if you grow hemp and make your fuel, you're using up the carbon, the CO2 that you put up from burning the ethanol, methanol, and biodiesel, you're using to pull into the plants and you're replacing it with more oxygen. So it creates a cycle. When you're just cutting down trees and just destroying the place, you're not going to get that recycling anymore. So Jack was a big advocate of us starting to use hemp again. And the petrochemical companies know this. They don't want to deal with it. And then you look at the alcohol companies. Well, in most all states that have now legalized adult use, you're going to see a decrease in alcohol use because people don't want to go home with a hangover. They want to remember what they did all night. Women don't get date raped on cannabis, only on alcohol, because what goes on when I've never seen fights at it. I had literally lived in Amsterdam for over a year. I have never seen a fight at an Amsterdam coffee shop. I cannot say the same for American bars, because alcohol just gets you angry. And then the tobacco company also, they've got this toxic product. They know it, but you know what? At the end of the day, I enjoy smoking a good J, and you know what? And they don't want the competition either. And all of them have been funneling billions of dollars into the government to keep it the status quo the way they want it in light of the discoveries of the endocannabinoid system, CB1, CB2, anandamide, the myriad of medical uses. It's suddenly like what bothers me is when I run into doctors that deny science, I'm like, why are you even a doctor? Why do you even have a smartphone in your hand if you're going to look at the body of work in science and go, I'm going to ignore that? Really? Really? This is where we're at. Cancer patients get no love. Nobody listens to them. I mean, it bothers the hell out of me because it's like, I've often said this, that when they'll change their mind on cannabis is when cancer steps on their toes. And then suddenly they're the ones on the chemotherapy or the radiation going, please, something save me. And then
You're right.
teenage kid comes in with a J and goes, here, dad, try this,
Told you.
and changes everything. And you know what? And it's weird, man. I went to prison 2000. I was in prison for years. When it legalized, I heard from 3 of the prison guards on Facebook who found me and wrote to me and said, congratulations. You were always right. I always listened to you. And one of the most hardline conservative guys that was in there, I mean, mean as hell. We'll just call him Randy because he was Randy. I'm not going to give his last name because he was a very nice guy, even though he was kind of mean to everybody. He contacted me later. He said, Todd, I listen to you all the time. And the first thing I did the day I retired, I went to a dispensary and got some. He goes, and now I use it medicinally. He goes, and I'm so sorry you were locked up. He goes, you didn't deserve it, not even for a minute. And I was just like, wow. And like, you never know who's listening to you. And that's why I tell everybody listening, don't try to force the message. down anybody's throat. Just put the truth out there and let the truth find their heart on their own, and that's the best way to deal with it. And like what I've always done as an activist, when I'd meet somebody, instead of just shooting off whatever shit I want to say, I ask them, "What do you do?" And when they tell me, I find a connection that the plant does for what they do, and I try to bring them closer to that, because once they understand the connection that they share with it, then they'll go down the path of learning more stuff and they'll be open to it. And I think that's the beauty of learning, and
I say
that's
that
what it's all about.
I say that all the time, Todd. I'm not gonna. I don't want to argue with anybody. I love to debate. I love a good, solid debate. If you have some ideas and you want to present them, if you want to have a conversation about the plant and we disagree, I'm all about that. But I'm not here to argue with stupid. And when the reality is when you can present decent and reasonable facts, and it either goes down an angle of name calling or just sheer denial, it's just like, no thank you, because there's somebody out there that doesn't know even the most basic benefits that could be utilizing it, that could take advantage of it. Those are the people that I just want to like just stiff arm all the other nonsense, the stupid, out of the way, and then get to them. That's my goal. I don't want to waste my energy.
What's interesting is ever since I met Jack, I always try to figure out how to get beyond the choir, because, we would do rallies, we have our extravaganza, and it was, all the hippies agreed with us and him. But what I was always trying to do is get really past all that and try to figure it out, because like with the movies, The Union and the Culture High, it was trying to get beyond the choir and trying to resonate the message, because I would give away a lot of Jack's books, and I'd come back in 6 months and people ain't read them, and I'd get annoyed, because it's like, we wrote that book, we published that book, you won't even take the time to read it. Fuck, we're screwed. And but with the Union, you can put that in front of grandma for 120 minutes, she'll walk away saying we should legalize hemp. And the first one was a historical film. The second one was an advocacy film. And Netflix liked it so much that they transcribed it into 15 languages and they showed it in 70 countries for 5 years. And, trying to get the word out is what we're really trying to do. And now the next one I hope that we can create is the one about the endocannabinoid system, because I feel like coming back and be like, haha, tricks on you, you're a cannabis plant. You're making the same chemicals as this plant. So, and you're utilizing them the same way, like it or not. So trying to teach people about it and let them embrace it. And now with, AI, especially AI, if anybody on this is listening, you can look up things about the endocannabinoid system and cannabis history so wonderfully now, and none of that was available. I mean, like I said about the story of Jack, you could go all the way to Library of Congress in the late 80s and you wouldn't even find the truth. Now you can sit down in front of Grok or in front of ChatGPT and start asking questions, and it might hallucinate a little. Like I joke that it's like having a really smart friend who's high all the time, like usually right, but sometimes way off. But even right when they're way off to a degree, you just got to look it up. And it's really fascinating. And I think that if children of today are using that as a tool to learn, prohibition's over, because you can fool some of the people some of the time, but now it's gonna be a lot harder.
You're absolutely right. Oh man, I love that you mentioned the fact that you wrote the book and people didn't find it. You were kind of pissed, but then found another media to outlet, because I'm the other media. I'm the other guy. I have a hard time with books. I just actually textbooks and information-based books are way easier for me to read than a novel. I have a hard time finding the story in a novel, but I'm glad you did other forms of media, because people just learn different, and that's literally an element or a case to the fact that don't argue with stupid, just keep preaching the word and spreading awareness and positivity, and people are gonna find it regardless of the method in which you publish it, because I'll find you via the internet, but I'm gonna go check out your books. I'm gonna go check out your work in other forms, your documentaries. And speaking of the documentaries, how was that to make? You've done two. Have you done more?
No. Well, we made a documentary about Jack Herer called The Emperor of Hemp. I was around it, but I have anything to do with production.
Okay,
I thought
I'm
it came
familiar
out
with it
really
too.
good. There's a copy of it available on my YouTube channel. It's Todd737 on YouTube, but The Emperor Hemp is on there. A little video, which was a DVD extra from the Culture High, is on there with me talking about the Library of Congress and Jack Herer and the Wall Street Journal. And then there's a really cool little interview clip with Dr. Lester Grinspoon talking about his son Danny getting cancer when he was a child and his mom picking him up some weed at the for him to try, and really touching. And also my union is on there. Our union is on there. My friends in Canada are who made it. All of the credits go to Adam and Brett. Brett is a brilliant filmmaker. He's done a lot of other documentaries since the union. Adam is very good at what he does as well, and Steven, one of the other producers on it. And when they met me, they knew that I was a medical patient, and they didn't know I was the editor of Jack's book. And when they started asking me questions, I started giving them these like, tight, contrite answers, and they were thrilled because they were like, "We can use all this." And then when I told them I was the editor of The Emperor, they were like, "Can we ask you everybody else's questions? Because then we can juxtapose it against their answers." And I said, "Sure." So we sat there for like 4 hours and with me answering everybody's, doctors, scientists, everyone's questions. And and that's why I'm like throughout the movie, if that makes sense. And then it worked out really well because they didn't have connections to Joe Rogan or Dr. Todd McCormick or Dr. Lester Grinspoon or Tommy Chong to a degree, or a lot of these people. And I was able to facilitate the relationships with them because Joe's been a friend of mine. People watching this can go listen to me on podcast, JRE's podcast number 44, when we were doing it from his house. Joe was nice enough to be in both of our documentaries. He was also the MC at my first Playboy party, where I was producing parties with the Marijuana Policy Project to raise money and awareness for marijuana legalization. And Joe has always been awesome. I mean, I got nothing but love and admiration for the guy. He's a truth seeker on every level.
Man, I absolutely love hearing that. And to hear essentially had a critical role in making the documentary what it was by having these gentlemen, this talent, these influencers, like, was huge. It was beautiful
Yeah.
work. And in the 2000s, to have a documentary like that for a lot of people was some of the best cannabis content of its time.
I got a lot of compliments on the union because we dropped it in 2008, and somebody in Canada, it went on to a Canadian cable station, and then somebody recorded it and put it up onto a tour and started trading it. And we were really honored because we never expected, nor did we intend to make money off of it. That wasn't the reason we did it. And it was a compliment to have so many people stealing our film. So we were really happy about that. And the whole point of it is education, and that's really what I feel like what we achieved, because breaking it down into a 2-hour documentary that is palatable is a lot easier for people to digest than Jack's long book. So it is what it is, and I think education is the key to our liberty and our freedom. So you can't be free if you don't know what's going on.
No, you're absolutely
you know?
right. You're absolutely right. To
Yeah.
talk about
So I got a
genetic, sorry, go ahead.
good job. Go right ahead. Yeah,
I was just going to
move
say,
on.
to talk genetics, one of the fascinating things that I think that you've mentioned or have mentioned in the past, because we've talked in the past, not only did we talked before the show, you were on the other podcast, From the Stash, and we dove into your concept or your conversation of the primary colors. And there is an incredible story or theory that goes with that. And I'm curious if you're willing to dive into that.
Yeah, I could elaborate on that.
Please.
I started growing cannabis in January of '84, and I was reading High Times since the '70s because my mom and my dad read High Times and Easy Rider and In the Wind, and I would just pick up their magazines and thumb through it. And um, I was an avid grower. Like I would, take the centerfolds out and staple them to the wall in my little grow closet and stuff. So, trying to inspire my plants to look like the ones in the pictures. And I really got into it. And initially, when I got some seeds, it was from my mom's friends, supposedly some weed grown in Vermont. Smelled like skunk, smelled like shit. It was really nice. I loved it, loved it, loved it. And that's what I started down my path. And I just became such a student of learning more about the genetics because anyone who's ever smoked, they'll realize that, they hit different. They medicate different. One will help you more, one will make you more tired, one will make you more horny, drowsy, sleepy, whatever. So finding the right one for you is kind of something is a personal journey. And I was getting into it. And when you go back and you look at the initial plants that went to Amsterdam and kind of created all of these modern colors. It comes down to really Skunkman Sam and Seattle Greg because um, in 1984, for instance, Neville Schumacher's started selling seeds that he collected from Dutch coffee shops. And in his 1984 catalog, he says that he can't vouch for the seeds because he didn't grow any of them. But in June of '84, Skunkman Sam was in the Netherlands to hook up with the green team that was Bernard Brunning and Old Ed Holloway and the crew for that would own the Mellow Yellow Coffee Shop and Positronics later. And he joined the green team. And while he was there, he went to this guy's place and sold Neville some seeds. And then when he sold him these seeds, he sold him Skunk One, Hindu Kush, Afghani One, Durban Poison, California Orange, Indie Sad, Early Girl, Early Pearl. I mean, staples. And then he met Seattle Greg. And Seattle Greg comes along in about August of 1985 and or July, August. I'd have to ask Greg again, but in the summer of '85, meets him and agrees to sell him the Northern Lights, as he called them, hybrids. I believe it was numbers 1 through 11 or 1 through 13 or whatever it was. But those went to Neville. And Neville got two groups of plants from both Seattle Greg and from Skunkman Sam that became the staples of the Dutch seed banks. And while Skunkman Sam was in Holland, because after he went there in '84, he never came home, never moved back. His wife and his two children joined him in 1985, and they lived there happily ever after. And he was selling seeds by the kilo to Flying Dutchman, SSS Seeds, Sensi Seed Club before it was Sensi Seeds, and all these guys. And it was this small group of plants that really made a profound difference. And the reason I call them the primary colors is because just like there's 12 notes in modern Western music, makes everything from, Beethoven to Willie Nelson, rap included, you have three primary colors in colors that then create all of these secondary and tertiary colors. And it's pretty remarkable. And I think that it was the small group of plants, when you look at it, that then became everything we have in modern cannabis. Like, Greg's NL5 ended up getting crossed with Skunkman Sam's Haze, and NL5 by Haze became famous. And, Skunk crossed with NL2-ish and became Big Bud and became famous. And that type of shit happened. And it was the combinations of these, what I call primary colors of cannabis, that ended up becoming what we know today. And unfortunately, because there was a desire for quick yielding, heavy yielding plants, there was kind of a movement away from everything that took over 10 weeks and a movement towards everything that took under 10 weeks. So a majority of the cannabis we see growing today is 8, 9 week varieties. And unfortunately, because of that limitation on flowering time, it kind of homogenized a lot of what we get. And the biggest complaints that I get from my friends that especially try to frequent the legal scene is that everything is so similar and there's no diversity anymore. And they remember it from when they were younger. And I think the beauty of authentic genetics and the reason I went back to Greg and Skunkman Sam and Mel Frank is because I felt like they were the only people that would really know what they handed off in the mid '80s because they were the real people that had it. And, Skunkman Sam had never lost his genetics. Mel Frank, same. Well, he lost some genetics because his friend planted him in New York, but different scenario. But when I got the original Skunk One back, or got the original Skunk One from Mel Frank, it was amazing because he had the seeds that I got in 2019 sitting in his fridge from 1996, 23 years. And he had gotten the skunk seeds in 88, put them in the fridge for 8 years, got around to reproducing them in the summer of 96, put those reproductions in the fridge. And then when I showed up in 2019, he got them out and handed them to me. And I was having a funny moment because up to that point, we'd always been really close friends, but I have a really big house up in Northern California, and he would always come to me and stay in one of my guest rooms, and we go to the cannabis events together and had a great time. I didn't come down. I moved out of LA in 2010, and I was up in the Bay till recently, and he would always come to me. And when I got to his house, I was like, I've been here before. He laughed at me. He holds up the seeds and he goes, Todd, you showed up 2 weeks before you got busted to pick up these same exact seeds. And I was like, wow, 23 years later, he's like, yeah, life interrupted. And he's like, I hope you get to grow them this time. And I was like, yeah, me too. And I took them home and I grew them and I realized they still smell like shit. And that started down the path. And in 2020, I released them. I described them as acrid because I didn't know what a thiol was until 2021. And then it wasn't until the end of 2019 or the beginning of 2020 when Greg called me up and said he wanted to send me some seeds because his family found them in his sister's freezer. And I was blown away. And I asked him what they were. And he said Purist Indica, NL2, and NL5. And I was like beside myself. And he sent them to me. And I didn't question them. In my interactions with Greg, I think he's a freaking honorable gentleman. I mean, this guy volunteered to go to Vietnam in 66. He's a Marine, got out in 69, and he came out very anti-government. I mean, he's peace loving, I wouldn't call him a hippie, but he's definitely a peacenik. I mean, and I think he's a wonderful person, and I had no reason to doubt him. I just grew the plants because, my friend Don and Aaron from DNA Seeds always jokes that the terps don't lie, and my attitude is, well, the genetics don't lie. The terps sometimes do lie, actually, guys, but the genes don't. And when I grew the stuff out, Purist Indica was like a Neanderthal. It was big buds, full of resin. It smelled nasty in a way. You'd break it up, smelled like import hash. The leaves were really wild looking. When it grew big, it looked like a picture out of an Afghan book. It was like the way the leaves lay down. It looks amazing. And then there was Northern Lights number 2, which was phenomenal. Some of the biggest leaves I've ever seen on a plant. Awesome buds. Also makes thiols. And then there was the NL5, which exactly as I remembered it from the 90s. Like blew me away like total time capsules. And in 2012, when I was getting the Cannabis Culture Award, Skunkman Sam came, and I used the opportunity to take him outside and say, "Hey, will you sell me some of the original hayseeds you sold Neville in 1985?" And he looks at me and goes, "I never sold any hayseeds to Neville in 1985. What else do you want?" And I was like, my reality got shattered. And I was just like, "You didn't?" And he was like, "Nobody wanted them, Todd." He was like, "They weren't even on the menu." And he was like, "No one would have wanted long flowering varieties. They wanted stuff that they could grow." And I was like, "So when did he get it?" And he's like, "I gave him some plants in 87." And I was like, "Wow." And I was like, I stood there stunned. He was like, when he asked me, "What else do you want?" I was like, "I don't know." He's like, "I think you want the seeds I saved for myself and I won't sell to anybody." I was like, "Oh yeah, for sure. Those seeds. Those are the seeds I need." Yes. And he said, "Get your best hash and bring it over tomorrow morning." I did it. And he told me the story about Original Haze. When he came back, dude, in all reality, I think Skunkman Sam and his wife Diana are absolutely the heroes of the modern cannabis story.
Yes.
In 1969, 70, they met in Hollywood, fell in love, sold all their worldly possessions, and flew from LA to London. They hitchhiked from London to Morocco because hippies need hash. And then they went from Morocco to Germany and they hitchhiked all the way across Eurasia to Afghanistan, the Hindu Kush Mountains, and they went down south into India and they lived by Goa off the beaches, mostly naked for like a year, he said, collecting genetics and amazing. And then they flew home to California. He moved up to Santa Cruz and he moved next to a surfer named G who had created Original Haze in 1969. And he, being a seed saver, David, he would save the seeds from everything. And he was trading seeds with everybody because he had all these seeds from all these hashish producing regions. And he said that they were out crossing haze every year. So 69 was a three-way, 70 would be crossed out to something else, 70 crossed out to something else. And then by the end of the 70s, he was like, haze was out of haze. It was not hazy anymore. And in 1976, he released Skunk One, which was originally Afghani crossed with Colombian gold, and then that plant being skunk was crossed with Acapulco gold, and that became Skunk One. And because of the female dominance of the Afghan, you had the thiol development, which dominated the progeny and caused it to still smell kind of like shit, like skunky. So, he, over time, through inbreeding, of course, bred away from the thiols and towards the terpenes because I say to people, when you go for a hike, you don't stick your nose in dog shit. You smell flowers and fruits and foods and stuff that you like, you know? And this is all we all did as a collective breeding. We all bred away from the thiols towards the more appealing aromas in cannabis. So it wasn't just his fault. And what's fascinating to me is that it also changed because in 2021, when that laboratory out of Torrance released the paper about thiols and the hops industry and beer and how we learned about it all, it was fascinating because now if you're reading this and you want to make your cannabis smell a little more funky, just go into like chat GPT or something and type in how to manipulate the thiol content in hops and read, and then say, does this apply to canna? And it'll say, yes, they're closely related. And then say, okay, how can I manipulate the thiol content in my canna? And it'll break it on down. It'll give you ppm examples of how high you can go and not to go past 6.0 pH, because if you go too acidic, it'll block out other nutrients. But I think of it as an equalizer on a stereo because if you put an equalizer on a stereo and you can listen to John Denver, if you crank up 50, 60, 90, 100 hertz, that shit's going to sound like he got a bass drum behind him kicking pretty hardcore like it's rap music. If you turn down, you could put an easy E and crank down 50, 60, 80, 90, 100 hertz and it'll sound like he's hollow country music, rapping through a hole. Ha! And it's just not the same. But think of cannabis as the stereo and think of your medium as the equalizer. And it turns out micronutrients really matter. And you can't add too much sulfur to your medium because you'll acidify it, but you can mess around with it. And what becomes interesting is you can unlock the thiol production in the plants that are capable of making it. And humans can detect thiols in parts per trillion. And usually it forms on foods and fruits that are going bad to tell us, hey, leave it alone. It also forms on cheese, which is why in the UK they call skunk bud cheese instead of skunk. Because funny enough, there are no skunks in Europe. It's a North American animal. So they don't have their dogs coming home stinking like a skunk some nights. So when they encountered skunky smelling cannabis, they called it cheese because they were like, ooh, it smells like that funky cheese. They picked up the thiols. And now we're starting to learn more about it. And I still have three varieties. The original skunk one makes it. The Purist Indica still makes them to a degree, and the NL2 makes them to a degree. Even more if you play with the organic sulfur, the organic soils you're in, and you go with a rich soil. I am back to using organics after going like full circle from organics to hydro to back again because I feel that I get a better aroma and taste off of the dirt. And now science is kind of showing us that, yo, micronutrients really matter and was really a big deal. And you know what's funny? Greg's in the chat right now, and I just want to give him some love. He is one of my heroes. And if it wasn't for him, I once asked Skunk Man Sam, what do you think would have been the dominant plant if you hadn't bred skunk one? He said Northern Lights all day because it was already really popular in
He's
the
a
late
smart man.
80s. Yeah, and it was so different because the Afghans Greg had, my dog is sleeping. The Afghans that Greg had were different from the Afghans that Sam had collected in Afghanistan himself. So even though they were similar, they were different and absolutely awesome. And may Skunk Man rest in peace. I love him so much, but it's a little hard for me to talk about it because obviously he just passed away January
Yeah.
27th on his way to come see me for a month, and I'm still it's we've been friends for 31 years, and I have a lot of love and respect for him. He was my hero. He was one of my favorite teachers. I got nothing but love for him and his wife, and
In the
I
same
feel
way, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you.
no. I just
I
feel lucky that he loved me.
I'm so glad to hear that. And you know what? In the same way that you are an agent for your mother, your father, and your grandmother, we are also agents for Mr. Watson, because there is a lot of him in you, and you now have that torch to carry on. And I'm telling you, that passion, that desire, that fire, it's in there and it burns. And he's proud, he's excited, and I think you should be proud of yourself for carrying on that honor. And I'm glad that you share your emotion with him, because
Don't be making me cry, bro.
you
Right.
please do, brother. We're men here. We're men here. We're not
Yeah,
afraid
well,
of our
no, hey, you
emotion,
know what?
brothers.
I didn't cry when I went to prison, but losing David fucking rocked my world in all reality, and didn't expect it. On Friday, I was smoking hash and listening to Jimi Hendrix with them and shooting around in my truck, and one day the fucking he was stolen from us, and it breaks my heart. And I think he was a hero. In all reality, anyone who starts to study his career, I mean, this man was so fascinating because in the 70s, he started studying the trajectory of Roxanne Laboratories moving Marinol through the acceptance process in the FDA. And he saw an opportunity to go and create the generic equivalent to the synthetic THC, which was just regular THC. The synthetic dronabinol was just THC. So he moved to Holland with the intention of starting Hortifarm, which stood for horticultural pharmacy. And what he was wanting to do is bring cannabis, and he started the world's first private research pharmaceutical company focused on canna. And it was non-government funded, unlike Israel and America with the University of
Mhm.
Mississippi. And he was a pioneer before pioneers. And people in Holland, my friends, because I was good friends with a lot of coffee shop owners. Ben Dronkers gave me the Cannabis Culture Award, for Christ's sakes. I was the editor in chief of a Dutch magazine while I was there in English. I worked at Posi. I had my own office at Positronics. I had keys. Um, I was pretty much in the mix, and his influence with Hortifarm was so misunderstood because he was a pharmaceutical company and he was literally not feeling like he wanted to explain to these, I don't want to be rude, but simple seed merchants what he was doing because they didn't understand cannabinoids or therapy or terpenes. They didn't understand any of what he was doing. I used to get mocked by my Dutch friends when I got my prescription for medical cannabis from my Dutch doctor, Dr. Trussell in Rotterdam. They were like, "Why do you need a prescription, man? Coffee shop right there. Just go inside." And it was like, you don't get it. Like back in America, we need something to justify our freedom because they don't give us freedom. Here, you guys got the liberty. Well, you don't need to prove it. But for us back home, we're under the thumb of oppression. And when I came back home, I got stopped at San Onofre, which is a checkpoint between San Diego and LA. And I had weed on me because I always have weed on me. And I was going up to Jack's. And I was in an IROC, T-tops off, and they pulled me over, and it's supposed to be an immigration checkpoint. And I'm like, why are you pulling me over? I'm clearly an American. No one else is in the car. The roofs are off. What do you want? What do you want? And they're like, we're going to search the car for drug activity. It's like, well, then you're not here doing what you say you're doing. And I was like, I have a prescription for medical cannabis from a Dutch doctor. And they were like, what? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, I do have cannabis on me. It's for medical use, and I'm not going to let you take it. If you want to take it, you're going to have to arrest me. And they were like, be right back. And they came back and they were like, they went through the car and they found some Mexi and they found some Kind Bud and they were giving me a hard time. And they were like, well, just confiscate it. You can leave. I said, no. You confiscate it, call the media, call the cops, arrest me. I'm not leaving you my shit. You guys are totally ignoring international law. You're ignoring the Opiate Act. You're ignoring our federal laws. No, screw you. I'm not dealing. I give me my shit back or I won't leave. And they were like, couldn't believe it. They were like, couldn't believe it. And finally, the guy walks up to me. He's like, listen, man. I gotta go home in a little while. He's like, I don't know what to do with you, man. He's like, I've had family members with cancer. I'm sorry. And I was like, And I was like, "Tech it, leave the brown. You can take the brown weed, leave the green weed." And he was like, and I was like, and I need my rolling paper. He's like, I left him in the console. I was like, okay. So I got in the car and I split and I went to Jack's and I told him this crazy story about getting pulled over. And he was just like, he always joked, "You're the 100th monkey." I was like, and but that was when I had a conversation with Dr. Todd McCormick about, hey, you know what? We all need prescriptions. And me and Todd were good friends from '94 onward. I set up this debate for him at La Jolla at one of the universities. And when I went to pick him up at the airport in San Diego, I had rolled a couple of joints and I put him in the ashtray and closed the ashtray. And when he got in the car, I was like, uh, do you smoke marijuana? And he was like, leans over, he's like, why, do you got some? And as soon as he said that, he opened the ashtray and he saw the two joints. He goes, is one of those for me? And I was like, yes, they are. And he was like, oh, this is great. I was like, oh, you the real? And he was like, yeah. And we were best friends from that point on. I mean, Dr. Todd and I, he used to call me 2D. I called him 1D because he spelled his name T-O-D. I spelled my name T-O-D-D. But I love the guy. He became one of my great teachers. And then when I came back with my prescription, he was like, that's it. And that's when he started writing actual recommendations. And, you know, at the time when I told Dennis Perone and stuff about it, Dennis was like, it all changed at that point because we all wanted to be as legal as Elvie. Because this little old lady was like, look at my prescription, leave me alone. You can't take my pot. She was like, poor cops. If you were a cop and had to deal with Elvie, whew, you might as well quit and go home and become a fireman because she was gonna totally smoke you. And she was amazing. She's still amazing. But having that prescription was what convinced them that maybe they shouldn't proceed further. You know, tread lightly. This could go to court and you could get sued. And it changed the view of it. And that's also why in March, so I got invited to the University of Mississippi to debate the DEA with Elvie Musica. It was organized by Florida Normal. And when I went out there, I challenged the DEA agent, Wayne Rokes. I was like, you don't arrest Elvie. Will you arrest me for having an international prescription? And he was like, no. I was like, okay, what if I fly back to Holland and pick up a 90-day supply? You're going to be at the airport to arrest me? And he was like, no. And I was like, let me reframe that because you're the Southeast Quadrant leader. I doubt you'll be the one there to arrest me, but will your men be there to arrest me? And he's like, no. And then I literally, I have it on video. I said, look, you're all my, there was like 300 people there. I was like, you're all my witnesses. I'll fly to Holland tomorrow and pick it up. We'll see if he's bluffing. And he looked at me like, if he had x-ray vision, I would have just become a pile of ash at that point because he was like, you kid, I hate you. And the next day I flew back, I went to Elvie's house. I called up Martin Air, which was owned by KLM. And I was like, hey, I got to fly back to Amsterdam. And they were like, smoking or non-smoking? And I was like, uh, you can smoke on the plane? And she was like, yeah, international flights over 9.5 hours. It's no problem. And I was like, I have a Dutch prescription for cannabis from my Rotterdam doctor, and I'm supposed to use it every 2 hours. And
No.
she was like, hold the line. And she comes back. She's like, would you be willing to show your prescription to the stewardess? I was like, I'll make her a copy.
Yeah, whatever you
Like,
need.
dude, no problem. She was like, okay, but you have to sit in the smoking section. I was like, fair enough. And she sat me in the smoking section. And I have video of being on the plane. As soon as they turned off that no smoking thing, I pulled out my weed, you know, Richard Davis's Mendocino quality Hindu Kush, and it was so aromatic. And the guy next to me offered me a cigarette. I offered him a joint. We both said no. And how we sat there happily ever after. And I smoked all the way to Holland. I went and picked up my medicine. I went to the BioFac, which was the first time the Organic Symposium on Natural Goods in Frankfurt, Germany allowed hemp in it. And there was David Watson again with the International Hemp Association and my hero again. And I just had a great time and I flew back and I declared my cannabis. So when I got to the airport, I walked up there and I was like, hi, can I have the form for declaring my medical cannabis? And they're like,
They're
they
like,
handed me
oh,
a
it's
form.
you. Yeah,
Oh,
we
they
got a
handed me a
call
form that
about
said,
you earlier. We knew you were coming.
oh, they hate it. So
That's
they
it.
hand me this form
You
that
can
says
go, sir.
failure to declare. And I was like, no, no, this is failure to declare. I'm declaring it. Hand me the one that says I'm declaring it. And they're like, we don't have one. And I'm like, you should, because if you look at your customs laws, and I had copies of everything because I'm a reader. I go to the library and I was like, here's the custom laws. And see, it says cannabis. It says refer to the opiate laws. Here's the opiate laws. Here's the opium. And under that, if you have a prescription from an international doctor, you can bring in a 90-day supply as law, and I'm just doing it under the Opium Act. So please give me the form that says I'm coming in with my 90-day supply of cannabis. And they were like, go to secondary, and I went to secondary and started all over.
Wasted
And
everybody's
that
time.
guy looked at me like, son, you're crazy, and I don't want anything to do with your bullshit. And he picked up my bags and he helped me walk through the double doors. And when we went through the double doors, there were two guys with guns on each side, and he was like, "Hey guys, hope you're having a good day." And then he opened the next door for me. He's like, "Good luck, McCormick." And I was like, "See you later, sir." And off I went. And at that point, it was March of '95. I realized they don't want to mess with this. They don't want to mess with medical necessity. They don't want the embarrassment of saying, "I'm going to deny this cancer patient a relief." And to me, that was like the pressure point for them. And I came home and I started the San Diego Compassion Club. Because I was in San Diego, it's a very conservative city, and I didn't feel like we could get away with capitalism, but I felt like they can't hang me for being compassionate. So we started redistributing cannabis that we got from our grower friends, me mostly, and giving it away, Richard as well, and a few others, because we were running into people that were legitimately broke and legitimately sick. And too many times, not too many times, because I don't regret a single moment of it, I would just give away whatever weed I had because I felt so fucking bad for people. And at the time, an ounce was $400. Now that I think about it, under legalization, still is. Huh? Could that be because of greed? But we'll leave that topic for a little later.
What do you
But
think? What do you think the price? That's funny you say that. What do you think the price of like a
should be
gram?
should be
Yeah,
it
should
should
be.
be pricing it on top of cost of production, just like anything else. For instance, you want to make a lighter? No problem. A lot of people make lighters. In order to compete with this lighter on a good market, you're going to have to sell it for a reasonable cost over production. You're not going to get $1,000 for something that should cost $50. You know what I mean? And the reality is that if it's a Bic lighter, 99 cents, you're not going to be able to reproduce a Bic for $100. And the thing I don't like about the new industry is that they're coming in with this prohibition era market goal. They want to make prohibition era profits. They want to see the price of it all stay what it was. I mean, and what bothers me to my soul is back in 1993 and 4 and 5 when I was on Grateful Dead lots, if they caught you, they were, for growing, they would shoot your dog, they would fucking seize your car, seize your house, put you in jail. I was held on $1 million bond at first, and then it was lowered to $500,000. $1 million bond for growing flowers with no drugs, no guns, no illegal income, no tax evasion, nothing. Just growing flowers in my backyard, $1 million bond. It's ridiculous. And what bothers me is now nobody's dog's getting shot, nobody's car's getting seized. These guys are operating legally. They get loans from their little, investment buddies, and they're just greed. It's just greed, greed, greed. And in my opinion, I love the idea of commercial cannabis because I believe that grandma should be able to go into the supermarket and buy an ounce of, Campbell's in a can for 89 cents an ounce and go make soup with it or something because it would be better than $2 chuck wine or pharmaceuticals or whatever she's using. I would much rather see her have that alternative. At the same time, I don't see that happening in the legal industry. They're coming along acting like, you know, you know, I mean, not to be rude, but cookies, for instance, burner. Let's go back to 2012. He was only well known for sticking a vaporizer in a girl's vagina. That's what he was well known for on the internet. He's not in the industry. It's all culture
Dude,
vulture.
that's
Drives
called
me crazy,
internet virality, brother.
dude. I'm so over it. I mean, I'm so over these people that have been in the
No cap
industry
on
less
God.
time than I've held plants for.
Dude, I'm telling you, it's disgusting the amount of it it I can't even explain it and I can't put it into words. The people and the characters and actors that get anointed in this game, it's frustrating. And it's like the 6ix9ine, the Tekashi 6ix9ine effect, where it's like they rap about being gangsters, but they grew up in gated communities and dad was incredibly rich. It's like, it's a facade, and it goes across the entire industry.
It's huge. And what bothers me, people ask me why I don't go to more of the events anymore. And I said, it's too many suits, too little substance. You know, people running around acting like they're, you know, long in the game because they've been in it for 5 years. And it's like, I don't want to be rude or anything, but it seems like yesterday to me. I mean, you know, and now that there's no risk to getting involved, it's like, what do you want to, you know, a participation award? Jesus Christ. I mean, I don't vibe it to a large degree. And you know, back when I started this activism, you could count the activists in America on two hands. I mean, Jack, Dennis Perone, Dr. Todd, Dr. Lester on the East Coast, you know, Dr. John Morgan, Keith Stroop at Normal, Alan St. Pierre. There wasn't many of us, you know,
Nobody
Marilyn
wanted to
Mount.
do it, Todd. Nobody, because there
No,
was
because we
real
got in
repercussion.
trouble.
You decided to choose this plant, and you said, I don't give a fuck about the government, about prosecution, about how you're going to treat me, because you believed, man. You believed. And there was way too much on the line back then. Now it's cool to be a pot activist. It's cool to be someone that smokes blunts and vaporizes out of a woman's vagina, takes his dabs out of your nose, 1 gram dabs till you're drooling. Like, that's the cool shit. And it's perverted how it's become more significant than the advocacy, the consistency, the passion, the enthusiasm, the story, the culture, the community. There's almost nothing.
Well, there's
That's
a
got to
lot
be
of culture
frustrating.
vulture.
That has to be frustrating for someone like you.
Well, for me, there's two sides of it. You know, I'm grateful to see it expanding into everybody's life. I really, really, really believe that it will make everybody's life a better place.
Good
I've
answer.
been doing this because I believe the more that we have it in society, the less war we'll have, the more peace we'll have, the more brotherly love we'll have. I think that, like I said, I never saw a fight in an Amsterdam coffee shop, and I would like that to be across America. I I got a lot of love for the community. I mean, I feel like what I'm doing with authentic genetics is all about the community because what I'm trying to do is, you know, 25, well, maybe not 25 years ago because I was sitting in prison 25 years ago, but let's go 30 years ago. Um, I could plant the seed of knowledge in your mind and hope it would grow. Now, I could put the seeds of cannabis right in your hand and give you advice on how to cultivate them. And to be able to help people with the same genetics that have helped me over these years is absolutely magical. And I feel really, really, really fortunate that I have friends like Mel Frank and Greg and Skunkman Sam, because if I hadn't had the relationships with those guys, I mean, Greg was nice enough to send some of his seeds around to other people other than me for sure, but not happening with Skunkman. I mean, the seeds I got from him were literally mocked not for sale. He was keeping them for himself, with Mel Frank, I mean, I'm the first person in his life, he's 80 years old now, that he ever let sell his seeds in his entire life. So I feel very fortunate. I mean, to be able to go to his house and him break out 23-year-old seeds and hand them to me again and go, good luck this time is kind of amazing. And I absolutely adore these guys. I mean, I think that they don't get the credit they deserve. And you know, to me, they were like, you know, the Johnny Apple seeds of cannabis, if you will. I mean, you know, Greg through his generosity with trying to spread the seed, and it's beautiful. And him and David, very similar people. You know, and Rob Clark again, genius, genius on every level. I highly recommend people pick up his books, Marijuana Botany, Hashish, uh, also Cannabis, Evolution and Ethnobotany, printed in 2013 by California University Press. If you're a real student of the plant, you should absolutely pick it up. It's worth every penny. It took him 17 years to write it. Fascinating. And I would encourage everybody, learn, 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 because it's the only ammunition we have to the lies is the truth.
Spoken like a true legend. I can appreciate your devotion to positivity as well, because I'm not privy to anything before my time. I'm not, I only get to see what it is and what it's not as it is right now. And the thing is like I can appreciate that you still at the end of the day can appreciate that there was a time where people were being prosecuted. You were being prosecuted. And now you said it's no longer than planting, it's more than planting an idea, it's planting seeds in the hand. And I
Exactly.
respect that, man. That's spoken like a true OG, Todd. True
Well,
OG.
I'm just an old G. So, but no, you know
Whether
what? I
it's an
mean, for me,
original gangster or an old gangster, you're both of them.
yeah, I realized when I got to prison, I was a man among men because even the guys there, I felt like I was surrounded by a bunch of guys who were boys in men suits because it was like, the fuck, you know? And like, and it didn't matter the
They are
racial
boys in men's
background.
suit, for
People,
the record.
yeah, they are a lot of them. And you know, it didn't matter the gang, didn't matter the nationality. They were all down with the ganj. And they knew why I was there. I had a long sentence. And when you show up on a weed charge with 5 years, they're like, wow, you must have really pissed them off. And it was like, yeah, you know? Yeah, they hated me. And it was really funny because I was an LA story, so it was on the news constantly. And they sent me to Terminal Island, which is in Long Beach, and San Pedro specifically. And when I got there, everybody knew who I was. And like Nicholas Sand walked me down to the Native Americans to try to see if they would let me sweat. And the brother that was in charge of it was like 40 feet away from me through a fence because he was working for Unicor. And I walked up from the South Yard, and Nick was like, hey, I'll introduce you. I'll tell them all about you. We didn't get 40 feet from each other. And he looks at me and says, Brother McCormick, I've been waiting for you. And I was like, you have? He goes, the spirits told me you were coming. And I was like, whoa. And we walked up to the fence and we shook hands through the fence. And he said, will you be sweating with us? And I was like, if you'd have me, he said, you are welcome. And Nick stood there. He was like, okay, that was easy. And I was
Wow.
like, it was easy. And then I started doing sweats with Nick and the Native Americans. And, you know, and in a lot of ways, man, you know, it was still a beautiful experience. You know, I was, you know, like, we're all human at the end of the day, and like we all piss and poop and bleed the same colors, and in all reality we have more in common than we don't. And you know, trying to bring that together is kind of where I'm at. I've always been a centrist. You know, I know there's a lot of polarity in the country with politics right now. I mean, my dear friend Greg is over there blasting the horn about Mr. Trump. And as much as I don't like trust fund babies from New York, I don't like either side. I was locked up by the Democrats. I think the whole thing was a crap show. I think they're all a bunch of, you know, paid prostitutes taking money from whoever will give it to them and doing their bidding. So I have no respect for the whole thing of it. And what bothers me about it is they pick and choose what laws they enforce. They don't like cannabis laws, you go to jail. If they think they can use you, oh no, you get a pass. And to me, it's just it's the system of injustice. It's not the system of justice. And it's all a lie. And they were afraid of the truth. That's why they barred my defenses, they barred my lawyers, they barred my doctors, they barred reality because they knew if I'd gotten in front of a jury and said, hi, my name's Todd, I had cancer 10 times, meet my 5 doctors, meet my lawyer, look at my income. I have no illegal income. I have no proof of distribution. I was just trying to grow my own medicine. I would have walked. And they didn't want that. So they were like, no, you're going to lose. And it was screwed up. I was facing a 10-year mandatory minimum. And on a 10-year mandatory minimum, you're not allowed to stay out on bond if you're found guilty. You have to immediately go in and start serving the 10 years while you're fighting your appeal. And I was like, wow. So they gave me 3 deals. Go to trial, 10-year mandatory minimum, no defense. Second deal was accept our, you know, everything and come in and cooperate, and we'll give you, well, we won't argue for prison time, you know. And I was like, not happening. What's the third option? Okay, you want to keep your appeal? Well, then you're going to have to go to prison for 5 years and we'll let you stay out on bond. So I thought, okay, I'll stay out on bond and fight my appeal. I got a speeding ticket on the way to LAX that was later thrown out by Orange County. Like when I went to court in December for it, and I was like, because I got it in November on the way to fly out for this thing called Spitfire, because I was a public speaker. I did things like Woodstock and shit like that. And while I was flying there, I got a speeding ticket, and while I was on my way to the airport. And when I went to court for it, they didn't call my name. So I went up to the lady and I was like, hey, they didn't call my name. She goes, what's your name? And I said McCormick. She goes, oh, Merry Christmas. Your case got thrown out. Forget it. It's gone. The cop said something nice about you and it's just done. And I was like, wow. So I went home and then the feds found out because I was on pretrial that I'd gotten a speeding ticket, contacted Orange County, said, would you please re-implement the charges so we can pick him up for violating probation? No, I wasn't on probation. I was on pretrial services, but it's the same thing. It's still a probation officer, same guy, pretrial probation, same dude, same office. And so they picked me up. They didn't pick me up actually. I wasn't home that day, and they sent the feds up, the marshals, to pick me up. And I was staying in one of Woody's houses in Big Bear at the time, Fawnskin technically, and I wasn't home that day. And when I found out that they wanted to arrest me, it was like December 19th. I was like, when do I get a hearing date? And my lawyer was like, well, your judge is on vacation because it's Christmas. They're going to make you sit in prison over the holiday and over New Year's. And I said, when's my court date? He said, January 3rd. I said, tell them I'll show up January 3rd. And he was like, they're not going to like that. And I was like, tough titties. You know, I'm not going to sit Christmas and New Year's in the prison. I'll fucking do the 5 years when I get there. And they were like, okay. And it was weird because the marshal was actually pretty chill about it, didn't give a shit. And then when I went to turn myself in on the 3rd, I was coming down Beverly Boulevard and I was like 10 minutes late. So I called up and I was like, hey man, I'm in traffic. I'll be there in like 10, 15 minutes. I'm not blowing you off. I just want you to know I'm on my way. I can't do anything about the traffic. And he's like, you got it. And when I got there, I went upstairs. And when I got to the marshal's office, there's like a bulletproof glass and you can see all the marshals. And when I touched the button, it said Todd McCormick. They all shut up and looked. And the marshal was like, came walking through, like fucking pushing people out of his way, being like, and he looks at me and they're all quiet and he goes, let's step outside. And I said, I step outside and he goes, hey, because of you, I won the cooler bet. I said, what was the cooler bet? He said, a lot of people bet you weren't going to show up. I said, man, fuck them. And he goes, I knew you'd say that. He goes, I'm from Cranston. And Cranston is the city below Providence, which is where I was born. And then I grew up in the city above it, which is Pawtucket. And I was like, you're from Cranston? He goes, yeah, I called my mom to tell her that I was picking you up today and she bitched me out for 20 minutes. I was like, really? He goes, yeah, you have a lot of support at home. And he goes, and I'm really sorry I even have to put you in cuffs because I don't think it's necessary. I was like, no, not at all. And he was like, and he was really nice. And then when the judge put me into custody, he was pissed. And it was weird because here I am in fucking handcuffs, getting put in the back of his car screen, driving me an MDC. And I was telling him, dude, I'm going to be all right. Don't worry about me. I'm going to be fine. And he was just like looking back at me like, he's like, you're the opposite of everyone I have to deal with. Usually the guys are freaking out, trying to run away, and you're telling me you're going to be okay. And I was like, I'll be just fine.
Chose your fate.
And it went on. Yeah. Oh, dude, I had a funny moment when I was in J Unit, which is where they shot Escape from Alcatraz. Literally, the movie was shot in J Unit. The first floor was like a mix of white and Hispanic, and the second floor was like Pisces and Hispanic gangs, and the third floor was black gangs. And I went looking for a place to smoke my weed, and I went up to all the floors because and I stepped into the black TV room and I saw the guy that I get veggies from, and I was like, yo. I saw the guy sometimes get herb from. I was like, yo. And then this little old man sitting in a chair looks up at me and he says to me, you remind me of a man packing a gun. And I looked at him, I said, why would you say that? And he said, because you're overly confident for the situation at hand. And I looked at him, I said, I'm gonna be all right. And he smiles at me and he says, I know you are, Rasta man. And I looked at him, I was like, oh shit. And we fist bumped and I faded into the shadow and went and smoked my weed. And I like, as soon as he said Rasta man, I was like, oh, you know too much, man. You know too much. And he just laughed at me. And I was thinking to myself, I was smoking the weed down the hall. I was thinking, not a lot of white guys probably pop in there with a big smile on their face looking around. And I understood what he meant when he said that. You remind me of a man packing a gun, because there's like a artificial confidence you get when you got a loaded 9 on you for sure. And you feel like I'm gonna be all right. And I just thought it was funny, and I was all right. Everybody was cool. And
the thing is like everybody's just doing their job for the most part. There are a lot of complacent individuals that could make a difference, like judges and stuff and politicians. But the reality is cops, these low levels of enforcement, they don't have a choice. They're just doing their job. No. It doesn't mean they're good people or bad people. They're just doing their job. That's the worst part.
I never got beat up by a cop. I was always super polite to them because I knew I wouldn't cooperate, so I didn't want to piss them off. And when I got busted in Ohio on July 18th of 95 with like 33 pounds of weed, me and my girl sat in jail over the summer in 95. Kind of sucked. And that's when I kind of like made it into mainstream media because USA Today wrote an editorial about me on August 21st. It was a Monday saying that they started off the editorial saying Todd McCormick left his help to help seriously ill people. The only problem is the help he intended to deliver is illegal. And then it ended saying sick people deserve help, not a ticket to jail. And it was a really good editorial. And they came out in favor of legalizing medical marijuana. And I was like, yay. And then the New York Times did a big piece about me in September of 95. I think I can't remember the date, but it was huge and it kind of catapulted me into mainstream media. And then Ohio kicked me out of jail. They were just like, go away, we don't want to deal with you. But the cop that arrested me and that had to like be with me to go to court and stuff, when we would be at court and it would be quiet, I'd talk to him because he was friendly. And I was like, what do you know about hemp? Are you a history buff? And he was like, yeah, I like history. I was like, what do you think of canvas covered wagons? What do you think of the flag that Betsy Ross knit? He was like, oh yeah, because I was like, it was hemp. No. I said, yeah. I was telling him canvas is cannabis. He's like, no, yeah. I was like, all the ropes, all the riggings. I was like, come on, think about it. It wasn't cotton gin until the 1790s. He was like, I never thought about it. And then when I'd go to court, he'd see me and he'd quietly tell me when I was wrong, hey, I said, what? He goes, I looked up all that stuff you were saying. I said, what'd you find out? He goes, you're right. I was like, killing me.
That's that
And I'm in
confidence,
handcuffs
dude.
at the time. And he's
Man with a
over here
gun.
shooting the shit with me.
A man with a gun is
No.
is a man with the knowledge, man. It's like you did refer to the quote earlier. It was similar to the Gandhi one, where it was like, "He who knows too much." That might have been Oprah. I can't remember, but the reality is that there's confidence and then there's cockiness. And I think you are in the confidence level where it's like you understand what you're talking about. You're a product of the plant, you're a product of its healing properties. And the faith is easy. The faith is easy. What more do you need? It's not hard to realize that everybody else is false, or not everybody else, but the government. One thing that you mentioned about the division, or I don't think division was the word you used, in regards to
Polarity.
polarity. Is that it?
People polarized,
Yeah, the
left or right.
polarization of the country. You know what, Todd? I do not believe that people are as divided as the media leads us to believe. When I travel, I've traveled from North Canada all the way to Southern Nevada, and it's full of love, it's full of warmth, it's full of community, acceptance, conversation, enthusiasm, excitement. I told people I was Canadian. I told people I wasn't, or I didn't tell people that I was Canadian, and nobody treated me any different. I was, I felt great. I felt good. So it's like, and I talk to people around the world, and it's like, I just feel like the media leads us to believe this way because somebody is puppeteering it, and it's easier to have us fighting than have us unionized.
Totally.
That's what I believe. That's what I
I
see.
completely agree with you. And you know what's funny is I have customers in the reddest states, Alabama, Louisiana, the Carolinas, Georgia, West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee. And when we were having the fires out here in LA, I was getting calls from all of them. You okay, Todd? And you know what? Dude, people are people. And this is why I kind of feel like the media likes to divide us, but it's crap. And like, my friend Bill just got invited to go out there. He was there just a couple nights ago to the White House, and Bill has been, to say the least, a real thorn in the side of Trump and everything Trump. I mean, he's very unfiltered, and he went out there, and I haven't talked to him about it yet because I haven't seen him since he's gotten back, but I'll see him soon. But I'm glad he went, because I feel like at the end of the day, man, we're all in this together, and we all got to figure out how to get along. And like I personally like I would never, I mean, I don't like any of the politicians. I don't like any of them for various reasons. But I'm grateful that during his first term, he gave us the hemp farm bill because it legalized seeds. It legalized all parts of the plant with less than 0.3% THC, as you were talking about earlier with THCA. And I think it's been an important step towards our future and people better understanding the plant. So I'm grateful for that. And you were talking that you don't think there'll be any move towards federal legalization until the next presidency. I somewhat disagree. And the reason I disagree is because of greed. And greed is a very powerful push. And when you look at the fact that over 30 states have now legalized adult use or medical use, that's a lot of income coming in. And the states that don't have initiative processes, like let's say Rhode Island, they were sandwiched in between two states that did, Connecticut and Massachusetts, and they decided to go ahead and legalize without a voter approved initiative because they realized that like 80% of Rhode Islanders live 5 minutes from the Massachusetts border. So they're just going to have to literally walk across the border, get their shit, and walk home. And that would just cut out all the Rhode Islanders from all that revenue, all of that. So they went, screw this, and they went legalized. I think you're going to see more states do that because they of the economic perils of not doing it. And I really think you're going to see a turnaround on the federal level because it's not sustainable. This ignorance, the lies, the prohibition, it's not sustainable. People have the internet, they have Google now. You know, we put an appendix in the Jack Harris book that was as thick as the first part of the book. I took it out in the 12th edition because I wanted people to read Jack's voice. And we used to have this thing that said, well, it's in the 14th edition now, but it said basically, we know how hard it is to get to the library and all, so we decided to bring the library to you. So it was all these clips and photocopies of all these what we thought was significant historical pieces that proved our point. And now you can go to the library just by typing it in your smartphone or using your computer, and you can get all this information. And this is why I don't think it's sustainable. And I think that states are going to scream at their legislators to let them legalize because more and more people are getting cancer, are being affected by it medically, realize that their friends are using it positively. I mean, even Trump, as much as I've never been a fan of the guy, he's been on record saying many times, medically, I know friends that use it, it helps them a great deal, it should be legal. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And we'll see. I mean, I don't remain that optimistic, but I don't remain that pessimistic either, just because I think states are greedy and they want the revenue, so they're going to change just so they can take it because they're watching other states make hand over fist tax dollars and they want to use it too, you know?
Very well said. And your enthusiasm is contagious. However, I totally disagree. I wish I didn't. I really didn't. It's just for the same reason you said, for greed. That's why I don't see it going legal. We have every single lobbyist group against us. We have alcohol, we have motor vehicles, we have tobacco, we have firearms, we have, name it. Like, what's the next one we're going to put on there? And they all are $1 trillion entities. And I
Yes.
just
I
feel
agree
like
completely
that
with
is the hurdle that we need to overcome because they're paying for our politicians. And until cannabis can pull $1 trillion numbers, which will happen, and with what you said in regards to state legalization, I totally agree. States are going to make that change, regardless on a federal level. We're going to adopt crypto, we're going to adopt new payment methods, and you and I were discussing this earlier, and there's going to be ways to get around it. I just don't see the federal government able to get away from the greed and corruption. That's all. I'm
I
not,
agree.
my glass is usually half full, but this particular conversation, it stays half empty.
I don't disagree with your assessment on that. It's, you know, from the perspective I have over time, I think that there's a lot of pressure to change it now. And, you know, you got these dinosaurs in office, you know, like DeSantis and a few others that are, you know, trying to push it back. But I think their days are numbered to a large degree. And, you know, I don't think there's as much anger or feelings of dismissal against it anymore like there used to be because of I remember reading in 1994 that cancer rates at the time were 1 in 3, expected to reach 1 in 2 by 2000. And here we are 25 years past that. So it means that either you or someone you love is going to be affected by cancer. And when that happens, you want to get your mind changed. I mean, that's one hell of a way to change it, is, deal with it yourself. And I can't imagine, I wonder often out loud how many cops and prosecutors, judges, and jailers that I've had, and I've had a lot of them over the years, are now using because they medically have to. And I bet you there's a good percentage of them that are now one of us.
Would wager that the amount of people that still to this day prosecute, and even the politicians that pass these policies use cannabis.
100%. I mean, 100%. I think the hypocrisy is really thick because I've met a lot of people that have come out to me as users and then afraid to say something. I mean, even when I met Hugh Hefner, I didn't realize it, but I realized it before I met him. But he was the money behind Normal in 1970. Keith Stroop gave a presentation to the Playboy Foundation, and Hef was secretly a stoner. And he gave him the money to go advocate. And over the 70s, he gave him hundreds of thousands of dollars and let him use the mansions to raise money, which probably pulled in millions in all reality. And then when I met him in 97, 98, he knew who I was from the news. And he grabbed my arm by my forearm and he started talking to me and telling me all he did with Normal. And I told him, I know Keith and I know all you've done. And he was like, really? And I was like, yeah. He's like, well, let's have Keith out for dinner. And he flew Keith out and I got to have dinner at the mansion with just Hef and his assistant Joni before she passed away of cancer. And Keith and my girlfriend at the time. And it was really amazing. And I asked Hef, because he ate cannabis. He didn't smoke it. I've smoked it with him, but he ate it. And I asked him, when did you start eating it? And he said, late 50s. I got turned on by the beats. And I was like, really? He goes, yeah, I could get away with, having milk and cookies in a meeting with alcohol executives, and they never had a clue. And the meetings would go long, and I'd be getting happier and giddier the whole time, and they had no idea why. And he lived to be in his 90s. And, I think he didn't really drink, one time after a party, because I don't drink, he caught me picking up trash in the backyard and he was like, what are you doing? I said, what are you supposed to do at your friend's house after a party? And he looked at me and goes, you want a cookie? And I said, a cookie? And he said, yeah, cookie. So we went up the stairs and across the thing and down into the kitchen. And he had a little drawer and it said HMH only. And he gave me a cookie. And I was like, it was funny because he gave me a cookie and there was a part of me that wanted to save it because it was like, this is a collectible cookie if I ever got one. But I ate that thing on the way home because it was a delicious cookie as well. And I became good friends with the woman and her husband who would make his cookies, because at one of the parties she came up to, she goes, that was some good shit. And I was like, how do you know? She's like, we turned it into cookies. And I was like, you did? She's like, we the cookie makers. And I was like, oh, so only we know. She's like, that's right. And I was like, okay, we cool. It's like,
oh my,
oh dude, it was hilarious, man. When we were having dinner that night, he's like, can you get some bud for me? And I was like, yeah. I was like, how do I get a hold of you? And he's like, just call and ask for me. And I was like, really? Just call the Playboy Mansion and ask for Hef? That works? He looks at me, he goes, it works for you. And I was like, oh, you're killing me. And from then on, he was like, dude, he was such a nice guy. He had a child. Like, I feel bad after he died, all these people talking shit about him, because when I was there, dude, everyone around him had been around him since the 50s and the 60s, and his staff and his friends were all so tight. I mean, I got to go over there for party nights, fight nights, movie nights. I was over there for poker night one night. I got to go over there in the afternoons on a Sunday when there wasn't anyone but me and peacocks running around. I got home movies of monkeys, and dude, they were a zoo, so I was stoned and I was like, look at the monkeys. I mean,
yeah.
I was a stoner, but I got to see a side of it that was pretty amazing. And then when I got out of prison, they asked me if I would produce the party. So I produced parties there 2007, 2008, 2009, and to try to raise awareness and try to get more people and celebrities and money into helping us legalize. Because I felt like it was a paper wall of ignorance. How are we going to push it over? And before I went to prison, when I did Woodstock, is as crazy as it sounds. I opened Woodstock, by the way.
That is crazy. See, before you get into that, I think it's amazing that your influence was so heavily impacted by not only just cannabis, but music as well. Because you've mentioned not Johnny Cash. You mentioned Pink Floyd. You've mentioned American Pie. It. I have a shirt. I have a saying that music raised me and cannabis saved me.
That's
And
beautiful.
I live by that because I feel like it's so intertwined. And to know that you did Woodstock, dude, how
It
did
was
that feel?
insane. I kept wondering, when are they going to find out I'm not a celebrity? Um, I was on this thing called
They
Spitfire.
won't.
So well, Zach De La Rocha of Rage had this idea to put actors, activists, and actors, musician activists and actors together so that when we go to colleges, they would show up to see the celebrities and listen to the activists. So initially, it was me, Woody Harrelson, Chris Novoselic of Nirvana, Michael Franti, Amy Ray, the Indigo Girls. Um, Jello Biafra joined us. I did Woodstock with Andy Dick, Mickey Hart of the Grateful Dead, Rosie Perez joined us at Woodstock as well on Saturday. Kenneth Cole, the fashion um, guy, also hit me up for the ganj. Yeah, he was cool as shit. And you know what the thing is that what we were trying to do is raise awareness, and they booked us for Woodstock, and then I was the first act on the first stage, on literally the West Stage. Friday and Saturday morning at 11:35, I got to walk out there and say, "Welcome to Woodstock. My name's Todd McCormick." And of course, I was like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" But they were nice to me, and it worked out really well. And I was up there bitching about the drug war and wanting to legalize the herb, and they were really nice about it. But it was really good to try to, the whole thing for me has been about trying to educate, and how do you educate more people and more people and more people. And there was a lot of people there that day, and then it was funny because out of the DVD for Woodstock, out of they give this little thing at the end of Spitfire, and it's me being interviewed, and I'm like, really? How the fuck do you miss Mickey Hart, Rosie Perez, Andy Dick, Kenneth Cole, Michael Franti, and go with Todd? Whatever, but they did, and but I was grateful. I mean, like, trying to get the word out was what it was always all about, and it's been pretty incredible. It really, I've found myself in a lot of strange places with the microphone trying to educate people, and that was one of them for sure. And but when I was there, I started an organization called AHEM, which stood for Artists Helping End Marijuana Prohibition. I had it on my chest.
Sweet.
And what AHEM was trying to do is get guys like Dave Matthews, who I was friends with at the time. I haven't seen him in a while, but I'm sure he'd give me a hug if I saw him. And a lot of musicians, Adam from the Counting Crows, I could go on and on. And I was trying to get, because they all supported the cause. I mean, Dave's been a pothead forever, and trying to get them to kind of come forward. And it was huge. I mean, you say music raised me, and it's funny because I was a huge fan of Steppenwolf. Doc John Kay wrote a song called "Don't Step on the Grass, Sam." And it's fucking amazing. And when I got to meet him because he did Politically Incorrect in the 90s, and whatever, I was friends with Bill, so I was there that day and asked Bill, would you introduce me to John Kay, because he's one of my biggest inspirations. His music is lyrically incredible. And he was like, sure. So we got to sit and hang out for a half hour. And John was like, what do you do now? And I was like, I'm a fucking activist because of you. I was like, don't step on the grass, Sam, the ostrich, power play, move over. I was like, I heard that shit. It changed my life. And he was just like, and he gave me a hug. And I was like, how did you get the idea for writing Don't Step on the Grass? And because Todd, it was a true story. We were in a hotel in LA and we turned on the TV and they were having a debate, and there was this guy with long hair and far out clothes, and of course he didn't count. And then you had some guy that was just another Joe, bought by Uncle Sam, and he didn't count. And he was like, the whole thing was just a charade. And if you listen to the song, starts off turning on the boob tube, turning on the boob tube. How do you put it? Staring at no, turning yes, staring at the boob tube, turning on the big knob, trying to find some life in a wasteland. Finally, trying a program. Gonna deal with Mary Jane. I'm ready for a trip into hate land. And he goes on, he says, obnoxious Joe comes on the screen along with his yes, self-righteous Sam, and one more guy who doesn't count. His hair is long and his clothes are too far out. And then Sam, pushing back his glasses, says the saying casually, I was elected by the masses. And with that in mind, he starts to unwind a vicious attack on the finest of grasses. And it's beautiful, man. He
Oh,
sings, dude, it's
bars.
such a beautiful song, dude. And he wrote this in 1968. And I remember hearing it with headphones on while I was high, thinking, and then he had another song called The Ostrich. Ah, you want to get your mind blown. He sings, we call you when you're 6 years old and drag you to factories to train your brain for 18 years with promise of security, and then you're free. And for 40 years, you waste to chase the dollar sign so you may die in Florida at the pleasant age of 69. Dude, it's incredible. And then he says, you're free to speak your mind, my friend, as long as you agree with me. Don't criticize the fatherland or those who shape your destiny, because if you do, we'll send out all our boys in blue. They'll find a way to silence you. And if, dude, the guy resonated through my soul with this shit. And I didn't see another path other than being kind of an activist and standing up for what I believe in and trying to make the world a different place. And it was absolutely my mom's albums that made me go, wow, man. And, Pink Floyd, massive, like massive. Like Pink Floyd was, I mean, I still think it is. I mean, I feel bad for the younger generation because I feel like their music is lacking in lyrical
Don't get me
depth.
started. Don't get me.
Oh
You
my
and I
God, you know
talked
what I'm
about this
saying?
earlier, and movies and music are nothing at what they were. It's boom up, boomed up, boomed up, boom, boom, boomed up. It's just like this club beat, no lyric. It just has no purpose. It has no depth, and I feel like I literally sound like a grandfather when I'm like, today's kids, I tell you, they just don't. The music sucks. The movies are horrible. I get it. I get it. And it's like I'm just pushing 40 and I can't stand like music, and it like maybe it's getting a little better, but I'm not finding it. I'm stuck back in the past.
No, I think it's a lot of it is, as Frank Zappa would say, strictly commercial, and it
That's
kind of
it.
breaks my heart. And
That's it.
and what are you gonna do about it? And I feel grateful. I mean, Zeppelin with their, I remember their song Friends, although whenever somebody needs you, don't let them down. Although it grieves you, someday you'll be looking for what they do, looking for what you knew. And it's true. I mean, that shit, I remember hearing it and it was like never went away in
Mm.
my brain. And I was just like, I don't think it made it more positive, you know what I mean? And a lot of that music wasn't, it was before my generation, but man, it had a lot of resonation with me. And I still think, I mean, art is a big push in the world, and cannabis has been a huge. I asked Bill Maher once, what do you attribute cannabis with doing it for you in your life? He goes, other than giving me every good idea I've ever had, not a damn thing. I was like,
How could
okay.
it?
How could it? And he's been someone that since the 70s, he was selling grass when he was in college to pay for grass because he grew up, not with poor parents, but he was, modest, middle class, didn't have much, made the best of it. And I respect that a great deal. And for a lot of us, I mean, when I was only 12 years old, I started selling herb, started selling my mom's herb. And it wasn't to get rich. It was just to buy gas for my motorcycle and get some, food and hamburger and have a little extra for myself. It was, and also it was to get it to my friends because they needed it. And if I didn't get them grass, they were going to drink alcohol. And if they drank alcohol, I didn't like hanging out with them because they turned into instant assholes and it wasn't fun anymore. So I was a big advocate of of spreading the ganja vibe, so to speak, because I thought it was a very positive vibe to spread, you know?
And Todd, I am eternally thankful that that's the mission you chose. Sir, you have lived a life of 1,000 lives. I feel like I've lived a couple lives in my day, but it doesn't hold a candle to the flame of the experiences, the people, the time, the stories, everything that you have to tell. And I would kill to do a mushroom trip or drop some acid or any time with you, dude, because I feel like it would just be an unless you don't do that anymore. It would
Oh,
just be
I love my trips, bro. You know what's
oh,
crazy? I have Dr. John Lilly's personal deprivation tank. The guy that they made Altered States, the movie about, the guy that Day of the Dolphin was made about, Dr.
No
John Lilly.
way.
Dude, I got invited to his Malibu pad in '97 before he moved to Maui, and we just hit it off, and we started talking about cancer and life and death and everything. And I was able to float in his tank. I did 1 cc ketamine and freaked
Dude.
out. And then when I came out of the tank, him and I spent about 3 hours talking in the kitchen, and we just bonded. And then 2 days later, his assistant Craig shows up saying, "Hey, man, you left a real positive impact on Dr. Lilly. He wants to know if you want his deprivation tank." And I was like, "Yeah," because they're like 10 grand. And he's like, "I knew you'd say yes. Help me unload it. It's in the pickup in your driveway." And I was like, so I went down there, and there's this deprivation tank, and I was just like, "Oh my God, I still have it to this day." And I even have his shower shoes that he would wear between the dep tank and the shower. And I don't know how long it'll take me to walk a mile in his shoes, but I'm trying.
Do
I'm
it.
trying.
Do it.
Dude,
And
amazing.
that'd be amazing. I've thought about a deprivation tank sober. I couldn't imagine if I had the opportunity to sit there with my own eternity and my own thoughts to just bounce
Oh, it's
around
awesome.
like a ping pong ball inside my head. It could have a lot
Ash
of
is my
good effects
favorite.
and a lot of bad effects.
Yeah, I find it to be really, for those listening, a deprivation tank is a 4 foot by 8 foot, basically rectangle with an angled door that shuts. It blocks out the light. So once you're in it, it's black. You don't have any visual. And then the water, you're in 10 inches of water that is the same temperature, about 96.5 degrees as your skin. And so you don't really feel where your skin ends and the water begins because it's similar. And then because your ears are under the water, you don't really hear the same way. So the deprivation is the vision, the hearing, and the sensory of your skin. And it's amazing. And I did it on K. I've done it on acid. I've done it on hash and
Uh,
grass. My favorite was just getting up at like 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, and walking naked from my bed to my dep tank because it was in my bedroom. And then I would just get in it and float for like 45 minutes to an hour and wake up at like 6 a.m. feeling like I was completely refreshed and I didn't have any aches or pains because when you're in the water, there's no pressure points on your body. So there's no like, you're not turning over because one side's getting pinched.
right.
It feels very differently. And the dreams I would have in the thing were just amazing. And they're phenomenal. It's a way to meditate in a way that's hard to achieve if you don't have all of the other stuff turned off. And that's why in a lot of ways, I think meditation is really important. I've been meditating. I started taking martial arts when I was 12, Okinawa and Wei-Chiru. And I think meditation and self-improvement and not dedication, but discipline is
Just
real. Dedication is important too, but being able to be disciplined is disciplining yourself. That is a big part of maturity, and I'm grateful that I found a good martial arts instructor when I was just 12 years old.
good for you. I agree. I think discipline comes before dedication. In order to have dedication, you got to have the discipline, right? And I think discipline's huge. And I'm glad you
For me,
mentioned
it
it.
came in reverse
Oh,
because
for
I
real?
wanted to be Bruce Lee. So I was dedicated to learning the arts, and then I didn't realize what I was going to learn once I started learning it. It opened me up to Eastern philosophies and a way of looking at the world in a completely philosophical way. I started listening to Alan Watts, and a lot of his philosophies, and it really kind of changed the way I looked at a lot of it. And smoking the ganj and the hash and becoming more of a philosopher as a teenager was, in a lot of, Confucius is all philosophy. The ancient teachings are passed down through, like little moral like lessons and stories. And it was interesting because I took martial arts from really 1982 until I left the state in 1991. And at the end of it, I felt like all of the physical training was just a metaphor for the mental. Because when you get into the ring and you start to fight, you can't be thinking about things outside of the ring. You have to be completely present. And now opportunity comes to you in the form of a roundhouse kick to your head. And within a fraction of a second, you've got to be able to think about everything you've ever learned, pick the best moves, put them together in a string of actions, and then execute them as quickly and powerfully as you can without really double thinking yourself. And it really taught me how to assimilate knowledge and to be present with it. And when I left him and left his training, I started applying it to my everyday life. So now instead of, having a, glove up and get in the ring, it was more like a red light that I thought was taking too long, or an ignorant person that I thought, and Bruce Lee used to joke that being able to stay calm is a superpower. And I believe he is totally true, because only the people you love should be able to have the code to push the button to your heart or your emotions. And people that you don't know shouldn't even have access to that thing. They shouldn't even be able to, give you a ripple in your calmness of your lake of life. And I think a lot of people mix that up. They let people that are insignificant to them really bother them, instead of just letting it, nothing, like nothing.
That's
And
very
I
well
believe it
said.
was a lesson.
Very well said. I
Yeah.
like how you the code, the family, and the code. That's a great analogy. That's because that's exactly how it should be. Not everybody should have the ability to just set you off. Because
Nope.
why? Because why? You
I went through
know?
prison laughing, dude. I got pulled out of the hole once, and I just read some fan mail, and I was laughing, and I'm in the hole for smoking weed. And he pulls me out, and I'm in handcuffs to take a shower. And he's like, "Why the fuck you always so happy, McCormick?" And I said, "Because I wake up grateful that I could walk to the toilet and take a shit on my own." And he looks at me and goes, "Fuck you, McCormick." But he
Boom.
said it with a smile, and I was like, "Fuck you too." And I had handcuffs on, and he was like, "Get in the shower." And I went in the shower, it was supposed to be a 3-minute shower. Half hour later, I was like, "Hey, when am I done?" He's like, "I thought I was giving you extra time." I was like, and then when he came and got me, he's like, "Hey, McCormick," he's like, "I actually have a lot of respect for you." He's like, "Please don't think I'm busting your balls." He's like, "But every time I see you, you're fucking smiling." He goes, "I don't see many people smiling in the hole." And I was like, "Hey, man, being in the hole is better than being in that fucking insane asylum." And he was like, "See, this is what I mean." And he locked me back in the room. I went back to reading my books, not giving a fuck. You know what I
It's a
mean? But I'm
testament to your character, Todd. Um,
I'm good at not giving a fuck, bro. Let me tell you. But
you
you
and
know
I
what? There's
both
another thing that I want to say.
superpower.
It's a, s- it really is, and it's funny because there's a tenet in martial arts that I've always loved, and it works with children and dogs, and it's that you do not get respect through discipline. You only get discipline through respect. And so many people got it wrong because they try to discipline the fuck out of their kids and the kids don't respect them. And you can't do it that way. You have to have your kids respect you and then they will
Mhm.
fucking love you and they will do whatever you want. And I was teaching this kid, Josh, in 93 martial arts. And his dad was there to pick him up one day, and I ran out of water, and I put my glass down. And Josh had run out of water earlier when he was stretching, and when he put his glass down, he went to go stretch, and I went over, grabbed his cup, went over, put some water in it, put some ice in it, put it back so he would have it. And he just returned the favor. But when his father saw him quietly get up, walk over while he and I were talking, grab my glass, just look at me and just nod, go over, put some water in it, put it back and sit back down. His dad sat there like, "What did you do to my son?" And then he was like, "Go sit in the car for a minute. I want to talk to Todd." And this guy was the vice president of a pharmaceutical company in La Jolla. I'm not going to say his name, but the dude was very well off, and very nice guy, very smart. And when his son walked out, he said to me, he goes, "I can't get my son to pay attention to anything I say or do. How the hell did you do that?" And I told him, I said, "Dude, I just did it for him. He ran out of water. I filled his cup. I ran out of water. He filled my cup. And then I told him what I told you. You can't get respect through discipline. You have to get discipline through respect." And he said, "Can you write that down for me? I need to never forget that." And I did write it down and handed it to him on a piece of paper. And he was just like, "I've been doing this wrong." And he laughed and he thanked me and he split. And he was doing it wrong because if you do it right, your kid, like with my grandmother, dude, there's a picture of my grandmother right above my desk right now. I love that old lady with my whole heart because she taught me everything that made me the man I am today. She taught me to be loyal, to be honest, to work hard, to honor people that do all of the above. You know, grandma was the shit. Go back to Leonard Skinner. Be a simple man, bro.
That's
That's
it.
really the key to it all.
You're
It
very
really is.
lucky. You're very lucky to have very important women in your life and to have a very important man in your life too. Because a lot of today's men don't have those. They don't have strong women in their lives. They don't have strong male figures in their lives, and it leads to a lot of uncertainty and a lot of questions as an adult and as a father and a husband on how to conduct yourself. And
Yes,
you
sir.
not having to worry about those things gave you that extra energy to devote to what you were passionate about, and that was this plant.
I love it. I mean, I feel like it was hard to go to prison. I mean, to go from a Bel Air mansion to a prison cell was a hell of a fall. And then when I got out of prison, they made me go to a halfway house on Hollywood and Vine. And I remember the day I got released, May 19th, you know, literally 6 a.m. And I drove all the way down Sunset and I stopped on the side of the ocean and I got out of the van. I was like, I'm free. And then I sat down and thought, and I'm homeless. Like I had a place to stay. I know this sounds ridiculous, but I met a girl at a Playboy party and she kept yeah, she's a
It's a
sweetheart.
great start to this story.
Well, we never fooled around. I love her. She was a
Uh-huh.
cool girl. She's a good friend of mine, but she stayed in contact with me and when I got out of prison, she let me move in with her and her daughter as a place to stay when I got out of prison. So it wasn't that I was homeless. It was just that I didn't have my own home. And now of course I have multiple, but at the time I didn't have my own home and it was, to go from being all set to holy shit, I got to start all over again was pretty daunting and it was hard. And because of federal laws, they make you go to the place where you got arrested, um, and uh, and you don't get a choice. And although I had a lot of friends here in LA, man, it's a hard place to, no money in LA. Good luck, Like I was just like, where do you start? And it was daunting. I mean, I was actually worried about myself when towards the last 6 months of being in prison, I was a little like, how the fuck am I going to deal with life? I mean, I've been in here so long, like, how am I going to get a job? Felonies, fucking locked up for 5 years, credits, shit. I mean, I'm screwed. And, what I ended up doing is I got a little house and I started a nursery and I called it Select Strains and I was the first to start selling cuttings around LA to the newly cannabis clubs that were formed, the Yellow House and Pharmacy, and I was the first guy running around selling cuttings to them. I had Romulan, Ice Plant, I had M39, Super Silver Haze, OG Kush, of course, and a few others, Purple Kush and others, and that's how I got back on my feet, just selling little cuttings for $10 each. And as long as you do the work. I mean, when I was a little boy, when I turned 16, I'd already been growing for a few years, and a lot of my friends were getting minimum wage jobs, doing the minimum amount of work for the minimum pay that they got. Meanwhile, I'm over here growing, and if I wanted some parts for my bicycle or I wanted another motorcycle, I'd be like, oh, I just have to grow this much more weed. I'll get this much more money, and I'll be able to buy my bike. So I'd be like, okay, get to work. So I learned how to
Straponomics.
do the maximum amount of work for the maximum amount of reward because I had Mother Nature behind me pushing me along, going, just show up and do the work. Be a farmer. It'll be okay. And I was like, okay, I'll be a farmer. And because of my grandmother always pushing me, like, don't be afraid to work, I was never afraid to work. I get up and work too fucking much in all reality, but I got the spoils of it, if that makes sense. Like I was only 26 when I moved into that mansion, and I didn't, having money isn't everything, but I was poor as fuck, dude. I was a welfare trap for my mom. We grew up on welfare. We used to get block cheese. I mean, we had nothing. Like I didn't grow up in a trailer or nothing, but I grew up in like an 850 square foot little ass house with my grandma and a little ass Pawtucket, and we didn't have extras of anything. I mean, there were days, I remember the first day I woke up, I was 12 years old, I was already selling weed and it was cold. And I went downstairs and my grandma was crying. And I said, what's the matter? And she said, oh, we ran out of oil. And I said, well, what's that mean? She goes, we need $90 to fill up the oil tank. And at the time, an ounce of weed was $90. I would buy it, split it into 4 bags, sell them for $40 a piece, make $70 because I'd get 160, rinse and repeat. And I had $100 bill and I didn't have 90 and change. So I was like, can you break 100? And I was 12. And I didn't think it out because she was like, looked at me like, what the fuck are you doing with $100? And I was like, uh-oh, I didn't think of this. So I went and got the 100 bill. I was like, you can keep the change. And she started crying. And I was like, why are you upset? And she's like, what are you doing to get this money? And I was like, my old man used to always say, ask me no questions, I'll tell you no lies. And I was just like, so I was like, Grandma, let's not ask this question. And from then on, when she was Catholic, so she'd pray to Saint Anthony when she needed cash. So I would just go down and put money in her purse. I was the opposite of my friends. My friends were stealing money from their friends to go buy beer and shit, and I was putting money in Grandma's purse because she taught me the importance of paying bills and being responsible, and it was loyalty, you know, and I admired her more than anything. So I felt like it was part of my education of how to grow up was to be financially responsible with my grandma and to participate in the expenses of the house and stuff. And I did that through my teens. And I was just so grateful that the lessons cannabis gave me, like, I truly believe that I learned more about being a good human through growing than I did through even smoking, because growing taught me how to cycle with nature. It taught me how to plan my harvest. It taught me how to work hard. It taught me how to care for the plants enough, but not too much. So there's a happy medium, you know, because if you fawn all over them, they'll just not like it. If you don't give them enough love, they just won't like it. So you got to learn the balance of life. And I was so grateful for that. I haven't had a real job since 1993, and that was only selling Corvettes in San Diego because I thought it was fun. I mean, other than that, it's I owe all these books. I owe my entire life to Anja all day.
Passion will do the rest. Todd, you are an absolute legendary conversationalist and an epic dude. And I'm so thankful for you coming on the show, giving me so much of your time. If there was anyone who wanted to ask you some questions, if I can spit that out properly, where would they reach you? Where would they be able to get in contact?
You can just go to my website, agseedco.com, type in Todd McCormick in Google, it'll bring you right there. There's a phone number on my website. You can call. I
Don't
answer
share
it
that link, babe.
between. I'm not going to share the link.
No,
Or don't
sorry, I
share the
meant
link
to
right now.
my wife. She was about to share that to the chat, and I can't do that.
Just look up Todd McCormick on Google. You will find the way. But it's Todd at agseedco.com. It is, there's a number there. I'm actually very accessible. The reason I am is because I genuinely like meeting the people that I meet. Like, I love my customers in Kentucky and Tennessee and Alabama and Louisiana and Georgia and the Carolinas. Like, I don't give two shits about what you see on TV. Those are good people. And like, you know what? And they say everybody hates Californians. Not true. Not true. Not true at all. Most of the time people call me up and they say, "Where are you growing this stuff?" I say California, they say good. No, it's real.
That's
And I'm
right.
like, right on.
That's
Yeah.
right. And
And
you're a part of the reason they say that, Todd. Believe that. Todd,
sure,
thank you
thank you so
so
much.
much for coming on. We're going to talk many, many more times in our future. And this was a great foundation to that. So thank you for being on my show here. Thank you for being on MTS. And I look forward to talking to you many more times. And I encourage people to check out agseedco.com. I've tried it. I love it. It's authentic. And you're getting exactly what you pay for when you check them out. So, Todd, thank you so much for being here. You're an absolute legend. Thank you.
Cheers to you.
Peace, brother.
Cheers to everybody.
Thank you, Todd. That was too cool. Mr. Todd McCormick, friends from AG Seed Co. Man, I don't know what I can say after that. That was absolutely epic. I was totally engaged and just like in awe the entire time for that. That was so good.